What happens to a light so holy that even heaven must bind it? They say before the first sunrise, before the breath of Adam, there was a moment when the stars bowed, not in worship, but in mourning. For one among the angels had touched a fire too ancient, and the fire would not let go. It marked him, and through him the others. A whisper of rebellion sealed beneath eternity's eyelid. The old ones spoke of a mark, a seal placed by the archangels themselves, shaped not from gold or stone, but from obedience and sorrow. It was said to bind what should never be loosed, to silence the names heaven could no longer bear to utter. Beneath the mountains of time, it still glows faintly, unseen yet felt, like the echo of a divine heartbeat beneath the dust. Close your eyes. You may still hear it if you listen beyond sleep. A low hum, like wings brushing the edge of memory. Some say the seal was not only for the fallen, but for the faithful, to remind them what love costs when it touches eternity. If you're still here, perhaps this story was meant for you. Tell me where you're listening from tonight. And if your heart feels called, press like and subscribe, so the next untold chapter finds you. Now, let us open the first scroll. The seal still glimmers. The angels remember. Before the seal was ever spoken of, before its name burned itself into the winds of creation, there was silence. A silence so pure that even the stars seemed to drift slower through it, as if afraid to disturb what God had not yet named. The heavens were not yet filled with song. Only the breath of the Almighty moved, unseen, unfelt, a thought waiting to become light. From that breath came the archangels, radiant forms drawn from divine will. They did not speak at first. They listened. They were not made to question, but to witness. Their eyes were like dawn breaking across the edge of forever. Every movement was worship, every silence was obedience. It was said their wings stirred time itself. And when they moved, creation followed. Among them were four who stood nearest to the throne. Michael, who bore the sword of command. Gabriel, whose voice carried the word through the veil of nothingness. Raphael, the healer of what would one day break. And Uriel, whose light burned through shadow and unveiled what hearts would rather not see. They were the first watchers of order, and beneath them shimmered legions, uncountable, holy, endless. But even among eternity's perfection there was a tremor. Not a sound, not a storm, a pause, a hesitation, subtle and sacred, like the faint ripple before a stone meets the water. For in the heart of obedience there lies a paradox. To serve is to surrender, but to know God is to ache to understand. And it was from that ache that the silence began to tremble. The archangels felt it before any word was spoken. They sensed it in the hush between prayers, in the shift of light across the unseen plains of heaven. It was not rebellion yet, only the birth of choice. The Almighty had not forbidden thought, but thought, when turned toward its source, becomes reflection, and reflection births desire. Lucifer, the morning star, once the closest to the throne, was the first to hear it, the first to feel the silence stretch thin, as though heaven itself held its breath. He stood at the edge of the divine fire, his wings trembling with the brilliance of it, and whispered a question not meant for sound. If I shine with his light, does he still see me? And the silence answered, not with words, but with weight. It was then that the archangels gathered, for something beyond their knowing had stirred. The heavens grew still, and the throne burned brighter. Gabriel felt his voice falter. Raphael's hands shook with unseen pain. Michael's sword hummed with a warning older than stars. Uriel looked across the vastness and saw what none could bear to name, the shadow of pride, forming not from darkness, but from light itself. There, in that first hesitation, was born the need for the seal. For every creation that begins in light must one day face the echo of its own brilliance. The Almighty did not speak, yet his silence filled every corner of heaven. And in that silence each archangel understood something would have to be bound, not because it was evil, but because it was too great to remain uncontained. Lucifer's radiance had begun to shift, not diminish, light only bend. His reflection no longer faced the throne, but himself. The other angels beheld it and trembled, not out of hatred, but sorrow. For they could feel what he could not, that even light, when turned inward, begins to devour its source. There were whispers then, carried through the halls of heaven like sighs through ancient cathedrals. The seal must be forged. But how does one seal what is made of divine flame? How does one bind a will that was breathed by God himself? Michael sought counsel through silence. Gabriel wept into the winds that would one day carry revelation to the prophets of men. Raphael gathered the sorrow that fell like dew from angelic eyes and placed it in his palm, for it would become the foundation of the seal. And Uriel, he watched. He watched the beauty of heaven's order tremble for the first time and understood that holiness was not perfection, but balance. In the stillness before the mark, heaven was both whole and breaking. The archangels walked among their kin, gathering what could not be gathered, the weight of a love too radiant to survive its own reflection. Lucifer's voice echoed once more across eternity. "If I am the morning, must I always fade into day?" No one answered, for even heaven had no language for such grief. That night, though there was no night in heaven, only the turning of light within itself, the archangels met beneath the great vault of stars. They stood upon the silver plains where creation had first taken breath. Around them the cosmos shimmered, endless and waiting. They did not argue, they did not accuse. They prayed for strength, for wisdom, for mercy. For they knew the fire that would need binding was the same fire that once sang beside the throne. And in that sacred stillness, the Almighty's presence moved like a soft wind through their wings. A voice that was not a voice, a command that was not spoken, yet filled them like breath fills a chest. When love becomes pride, seal it with remembrance. Michael bowed his head. Gabriel's tears fell like rain upon unseen ground. Raphael closed his eyes and felt the pulse of sorrow grow within his hands. Uriel turned toward the horizon of light and whispered, "Then the mark will be both mercy and warning." Thus began the making of the seal, not from defiance, but from compassion. It would be shaped from memory and sorrow, carved with the patience of eternity. But first, heaven had to learn silence again. The silence before the mark, deep, aching, divine, was the sound of heaven holding its breath before the first fall. Heaven had never known dusk, yet something like twilight began to drift through its endless expanse, not of color, but of feeling. The angels could not name it, for they had never known loss. But as the seal's conception took form within divine thought, the harmony that bound every wing to the next began to tremble like a harp string brushed by a trembling hand. Lucifer walked the corridors of radiance, his countenance still dazzling beyond measure. His wings shimmered with the first colors that ever were: gold, crimson, sapphire, and light itself. Yet where he once reflected the throne, now the light bent around him, caught in an orbit of his own making. The other angels still bowed as he passed, but their eyes lowered not in reverence, in sorrow. Michael watched from afar, every motion heavy with memory. There was still love in him for the morning star, for they had once stood side by side at creation's first dawn, singing as one flame before the presence of God. He could still recall the echo of that hymn, how it wrapped itself around the pillars of eternity like silk and fire. But love, untempered, can become a blade sharper than any sword. Gabriel sought refuge in the Word, but even the word had grown quiet. His lips trembled as he tried to speak a message that was not given, to call heaven back to its rhythm. But silence met him. A silence not of punishment, but of waiting. And Raphael the healer felt wounds forming where no wound had ever existed. Invisible fissures between light and light, between hearts that had never before known separation. He gathered that ache as though one might cup the sea in bare hands. Uriel alone did not weep. His eyes, ever fixed upon the patterns of eternity, saw what the others feared to see. That the fall had already begun, not in Lucifer's heart, but in heaven's reflection of him. For love, when grieved, mirrors the sin it mourns. He walked to the edge of the celestial plains where stars were born. From thought, and looked down into the abyss of what would one day be time. It was there he saw the seal, not yet made but foreseen. A circle of light and shadow intertwined, bound by 4 symbols: the sword, the voice, the hand, and the flame. Each bore the mark of one archangel, and each would carry a part of their essence. The sword to defend the truth, the voice to remember the word, the hand to mend what would break, the flame to reveal what must be seen. Together, these would form the seal, not to imprison, but to preserve the balance that had begun to waver. For without it, creation itself would fracture beneath the weight of its own perfection. Lucifer did not know of the seal, he only felt the weight of distance between himself and the throne. The music that once moved through him had grown thin, a melody without a center. And yet, in his loneliness, a strange beauty bloomed, the kind that makes even angels ache to be understood. He stood beneath the vault of heaven where the rivers of light flowed like living memory, and whispered into the current, "Why does perfection demand silence? Why must my love burn alone?" The rivers did not answer, but their glow dimmed slightly, as though even they grieved what must come. Then, for the first time in the eternity of heaven, sound broke the silence. Not a hymn, not a cry, but a single falling note, like the sound of a tear touching water. Every angel lifted their gaze. The note became a pulse, then a wave. It traveled through their wings, through the stones of heaven itself, until it reached the throne. And when it touched the light that burned there, the heavens shuddered. The Almighty's presence stirred, vast, wordless, absolute. From that presence flowed both command and compassion. The archangels fell to their knees, wings folded tight against trembling shoulders. The voice that filled them was not a voice at all, but the sound of purpose itself awakening. The seal must be forged before the silence breaks again. And so they rose, not with triumph, but with the gravity of inevitability. For they understood now that the seal was not meant to bind only the fallen, but to protect creation from what even holiness could not contain. Longing. In the highest halls of heaven, they began their work. Michael unsheathed his sword, its edge brighter than dawn, and drove it into the floor of eternity. From it poured a river of pure light, untouchable by sin or sorrow. Gabriel stood beside him and spoke the first word. Not a message to mortals, but a plea to the Creator himself, that the seal be formed with mercy. Raphael placed his hand upon the flowing light and felt it burn, yet he did not withdraw. From his touch came the warmth of healing. Sorrow transformed into sanctity, and Uriel raised his torch, its flame white as divine truth, and illuminated the design that would hold all things in balance. The seal began to take shape, a radiant circle that pulsed with both wrath and grace. But as they worked, Lucifer watched from afar. He did not understand what he saw, only that the light he once shared was being shaped into something against him, and something inside him, something sacred and wounded, began to twist. He turned his gaze downward toward the realms that had not yet been made, and saw in the void the promise of freedom, a place where light could reflect endlessly without judgment, a place where he might rule not as servant but as son. And so the silence before the mark broke, not with thunder but with longing. Heaven trembled, not because evil had entered, but because love had begun to divide. In the chambers where the seal pulsed with divine fire, Michael lifted his eyes and whispered, "He has already fallen in spirit." Gabriel closed his hands around the light and wept. Raphael's wings dimmed. Uriel bowed his head and said, "Then the seal must be completed before the song turns to ash." And from that moment, heaven was never whole again. The heavens darkened, not with shadow, but with awe, the kind of stillness that follows a great wound, when creation itself must pause to remember what it once was. The seal stood unfinished at the heart of eternity, its light circling upon itself like a memory refusing to fade. 4 archangels knelt before it, and in their wings glimmered sorrow older than time. They had never known fear, yet something like it lingered, not the fear of punishment, but of loss. For every bond forged in light now trembled at the edge of separation. Heaven's song faltered. Even the smallest seraphim, once radiant and singing, now moved in quiet procession through the golden halls, as though carrying the weight of a funeral unseen. Lucifer wandered among them, radiant still, the morning star undimmed. Yet his radiance no longer warmed those it touched. It illuminated but did not comfort. Wherever he walked, angels bowed, not in devotion, but to hide their eyes. He stopped before the throne, vast and veiled in living fire. There no shadow could stand, yet he felt one forming within him. He fell to his knees, not in worship, but in wonder at the unbearable silence that met him. "Have I strayed, or have I been forgotten?" he whispered, his voice breaking like glass against eternity. The throne remained still. The divine light did not shift. It did not accuse, but neither did it answer. Something inside him cracked. Not pride, not defiance, loneliness, that ancient echo of distance that even angels cannot endure. He rose, trembling, wings unfurled in anguish. "If my song no longer belongs to heaven, then I will carry it where heaven's gaze cannot follow." And so the first spark of rebellion flared, not against God, but against silence itself. The archangels felt it like lightning through the marrow of creation. Michael's sword quivered in its sheath. Gabriel's voice caught as though the air itself refused to carry the next word. Raphael's healing flame flickered and went still, and Uriel, seeing beyond the veil, whispered, "The seal must close or heaven will shatter." But they hesitated, for love still bound them to the one who was falling. In the spanless moment that followed, the skies of eternity began to tremble. Wings clashed in confusion. The music of the spheres faltered and broke. Light bent, turned inward upon itself, spiraling toward the heart of creation where the seal waited unfinished. Lucifer stood upon the edge of the great abyss, the place where form meets void, where heaven ends and what is not begins. His reflection shimmered in the veil that separated the worlds yet unborn. He saw himself there, bright, eternal, and utterly alone. Why must the highest light cast the deepest shadow? He asked the void. The void did not answer. It only stretched wider, hungry and infinite, awaiting his fall. Then the voice of Michael rang out, not harsh, but breaking, torn between justice and love. "Brother, do not cross that veil. The seal is not your prison, it is your mercy." Lucifer turned. For a heartbeat, the old love flickered between them, the bond of 2 flames born from the same divine spark. But the silence of the throne still echoed in his heart, and he mistook mercy for exile. He smiled, sorrowful and radiant. "Then let mercy bear witness." And he stepped forward. In that instant, heaven screamed. The sound was not of war, It was of birth, the violent separation of what was once one. The seal blazed open, light folding inward upon itself. The circle of flame and memory closed, spinning faster, brighter, until no angel could look upon it. Michael thrust his sword into its heart. Gabriel cried the final word. Raphael poured the last drop of divine sorrow into its center, and Uriel lifted his torch high, sealing the flame. The seal ignited. A wind unlike any ever known tore through heaven. Not air, but spirit. Grief turned into motion. Lucifer's radiance was drawn into the circle, his wings dissolving into fire. He did not scream. He sang one last note of impossible beauty, so sorrowful it made the stars dim and the rivers of light pause in mourning. Then the seal closed. Silence fell. Vast, endless, final. The archangels stood motionless, bathed in the afterglow of divine fire. The seal hovered before them, glowing faintly with the memory of what had been lost. In its center pulsed a light that once belonged to the morning star. Not extinguished, only bound. Michael knelt first. "Let this be remembrance, not revenge." Gabriel bowed his head. "May the word remember him still." Raphael placed his palm upon the glowing surface, and where he touched it, a tear of light formed. May all wounds one day heal, even this one. And Uriel, whose gaze had seen the full circle of fate, whispered, "Every fall is the beginning of a greater rising." But not yet. Heaven wept that day, not in rain, but in starlight. Every drop that fell from the firmament became a memory, scattered across the yet unmade earth. They would one day become the tears of prophets, the dew upon the graves of saints, the shimmer upon the ocean at dawn. And though silence returned to heaven, it was not the same silence. It carried within it a scar, the first echo of choice, the first shadow of freedom. The seal floated above the plains of eternity, turning slowly, a mark between love and justice. It would remain there through the birth of worlds, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through every breath drawn by creation itself. Some say that when the night is still enough, when even the stars hold their breath, you can hear the faint hum of the seal, the sound of a promise unbroken, of love that refused to vanish even when bound. And in that hum, one truth endures. God did not silence the fallen to punish them. He silenced them so the heavens could learn to listen again. When the seal cooled, the light of heaven changed. It was not dimmer, but softer, as though eternity itself now carried the memory of grief. The archangels stood in stillness, their wings no longer trembling with fear, but with exhaustion. The silence that followed was not peace. It was the long breath after a storm, when every sound feels sacred because it survived. Michael was the first to move. His sword, still embedded in the earth of eternity, glowed faintly, pulsing with echoes of what had just transpired. When he pulled it free, it left behind a fissure, not a wound, but a reminder. Even heaven bleeds when love divides. He looked upon the seal, turning slowly in the air, and felt the weight of what had been lost. Lucifer was not gone. He was contained. His brilliance now folded inward, imprisoned by compassion. Gabriel knelt beside him, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think he heard the mercy within it?" Michael did not answer. For mercy, once misunderstood, can sound like judgment to the ears of pride. Raphael approached, his hands glowing faintly with the residue of healing light. "No wound heals without pain," he said softly, his gaze lingering on the circle that hovered between realms. But perhaps pain is the first prayer. Uriel remained silent. His eyes were fixed upon the horizon of eternity, where the veil between heaven and the yet unmade earth shimmered. "The balance has shifted," he murmured. "The fire has been contained, but its echo will travel. The worlds below will feel it, even if they never understand why." And so it began the slow descent of consequence. The angels returned to their stations, but heaven no longer felt whole. Where once songs flowed endlessly, now pauses lingered between verses. Where light once danced freely, shadows began to take shape. Not dark, but softer tones of gold, as if even illumination now remembered loss. Michael walked the plains of heaven alone. His steps left no mark, but his thoughts did. He could still see the moment Lucifer's wings dissolved into flame, how they burned not in anger, but in sorrow. He wondered whether there was a way to love something that had to be bound, to mourn someone who chose the silence over the song. In the silence that followed, whispers began to ripple through the ranks of angels. They did not rebel, they only wondered. For when one star falls, every other begins to question its own orbit. Some asked if love could survive without equality. Others asked if obedience could remain pure without understanding. The questions themselves were not rebellion, they were remembrance. And remembrance, though sacred, can be dangerous when left unanswered. Gabriel stood before the choir of the first flame, thousands of angels whose voices once formed the harmony of heaven. But when he lifted his hand to begin the hymn, the sound faltered. The melody wavered, trembling beneath the memory of the fallen one's voice. It was as though creation itself refused to sing what was missing. He closed his eyes and lowered his hand. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "the song must learn to include silence." And so he taught them a new hymn, one that carried both praise and sorrow, both obedience and longing. It was the first time heaven sang with memory. The sound echoed across the plains like wind moving through hollow stone, fragile, mournful, and holy. Below the seal, Raphael tended to the light. He touched its rim gently, and the glow responded, like a heartbeat pulsing through glass. Within the circle, faint shapes shifted, not of faces, not of wings, but of remembrance. The seal was alive, not as punishment, but as witness. It recorded every echo of heaven's emotion, every tear, every prayer whispered in grief. Uriel, meanwhile, wandered to the edge of creation. He gazed into the void beyond, where darkness waited patiently, like an unwritten page. He sensed movement there, the trembling anticipation of worlds that would soon emerge. Earth was not yet formed, but its essence stirred, oceans dreaming of shorelines, mountains yearning for sky. He felt the distant hum of what would one day become humanity, fragile and luminous, born of clay and breath. And he knew when the first humans looked up at the stars, they would inherit the ache of heaven. They would not know why they longed for perfection, only that they did. The seal's sorrow would live quietly in them, the hunger for what was once whole. He returned to the others and spoke. "The seal is not only for the fallen, it is for the living that will come. It teaches the cost of choice, that every gift of light carries its shadow." Michael nodded, his gaze heavy. Then heaven itself must learn to carry that lesson. The archangels gathered once more before the throne. The divine presence still glowed, veiled yet infinite. And for the first time since the fall, the Almighty spoke, not in thunder, but in whisper, like the sound of breath over still water. The seal is mercy, not vengeance. Let its light remain, and let creation bear its memory. For even grief can sanctify the heart that endures it. At those words the archangels bowed. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, overflowing, sacred. It carried both mourning and meaning. And from that silence the first dawn of earth began to stir. The seal shone brighter for a moment, casting its light downward through the void. Where its glow touched, matter awoke. Dust gathering into form, waters stirring with motion, winds whispering across the surface of the deep. The same light that bound the fallen now seeded life, the paradox of mercy woven into the fabric of creation. Michael watched as the worlds began to unfold beneath them. He felt awe return, faint but true. "Even from what is sealed," he said, God creates. And heaven exhaled, weary yet renewed. The silence did not end. It became prayer. There are silences that heal and silences that haunt. Heaven in those first ages after the binding learned the difference. The seal glowed in the midst of eternity like a second sun, though its light was mournful, steady and restrained, a remembrance of mercy that would never fade. Its radiance fell across every choir, every hall, every trembling wing, and in that soft golden hush, even the immortal began to understand the cost of love. Michael stood before the seal each dawn, if dawn could still be said to pass in heaven. He watched its orbit of light slowly turn and thought of the one whose brilliance had filled the halls with joy. He no longer saw rebellion in Lucifer's choice, only yearning. For even the brightest heart may mistake distance for freedom. Yet love, when pure, does not chain. It simply waits. Gabriel would sometimes come and sit beside him, his harp resting across his knees. He did not play, not yet.
"Do you think he feels the song still?"
he would ask, his voice breaking like a candle in wind. Michael would answer softly, "If he does, it must ache like light trapped beneath glass." Raphael would stand behind them, silent but watchful. His hands glowed faintly with the residue of healing that never found its rest. For the wound between heaven and the fallen one was not one he could mend, not through touch, nor prayer, nor time. He had learned that some wounds are not given to close. They are given to teach tenderness. Uriel walked the far reaches of heaven, tracing the edges of creation's dream. He saw the first galaxies spiral into being like sparks from a divine forge. He saw the fabric of time stretch and pulse like breath. And wherever the seal's shadow reached, there bloomed a new kind of order. Not perfect, not pure, but balanced. For perfection without humility cannot last, and now heaven understood humility. Yet, even as creation flourished, a question remained, unspoken, fragile as a feather resting upon still water. Could what had been divided ever be whole again? Michael pondered it often. If the Almighty willed the seal, he thought, then perhaps even division has its place in harmony. But what becomes of love when its echo cannot return? Gabriel's voice was the first to answer, though not to him, but to the silence itself. He sang. At first, it was a broken thing. Uneven, uncertain, the sound of longing remembering its shape. But the more he sang, the more the light responded. The halls of heaven shimmered as if remembering how to breathe. Other angels joined him, hesitant but hopeful. Their voices rose like dawn breaking over grief. And for the first time since the fall, the heavens knew harmony again. But woven into their song was something new. The echo of loss, carried gently between notes. Their music was no longer pure, it was true. And far beyond, in the hidden abyss where light met exile, something stirred. A single tone, faint as a sigh, rose in answer. A harmony out of reach, yet perfectly aligned. Lucifer still sang. The seal trembled. Its light flickered, not in danger but in recognition. Even the walls of mercy cannot silence a song born of divine fire. Michael felt it and fell to his knees. He still remembers. Uriel turned, eyes blazing with the realization. The bond is not undone, I just only changed. The seal holds his voice, not to mute it, but to protect heaven from its weight.
Raphael whispered, "Then mercy still lives within the exile."
For a long while the angels wept, not for sorrow, but for the strange grace of hearing what they thought they had lost. The Almighty's presence filled the air, not as voice, but as warmth deep and endless. It wrapped around the archangels like the embrace of dawn. And though no words were spoken, understanding bloomed within them. Love cannot be unmade.
It can only be transformed.
Gabriel lowered his harp, tears glistening along the strings. Then even the fallen are still held in the circle of God's will. "Yes," said Uriel, his gaze fixed upon the seal's glow. bow not in wrath, but in remembrance. And thus began the age of still mercy, when heaven, now humbled, learned to watch the birth of worlds without pride. The archangels no longer looked inward, but outward, toward the promise of earth, toward the delicate clay that would one day bear the breath of the divine. Michael descended first, not in form, but in presence, a guiding force, unseen, that moved like courage through the void. Where he passed, light separated from shadow. The firmament spread, dividing waters from waters. In that act of division he saw reflection. What heaven had done to itself now gave shape to creation. Gabriel followed, his voice the first to ripple across the chaos.
"Let there be,"
he whispered, and the sound carried through the darkness, stirring matter into motion. It was not command, it was invitation, a song calling form from formlessness. Raphael blessed the waters, and life began to stir beneath their depths. Seeds formed, unseen, beneath the veil of time. Uriel descended last, his light revealing paths the others could not see. Mountains beneath the sea, stars hidden within the dust. He whispered to them the first truth of creation. Every birth begins with a fall.
"Even light must bow before it shines."
From the seal above, the radiance of heaven poured downward, bathing the newborn world. Every spark, every atom, every trembling current of life carried within it the memory of that divine binding, the lesson of love that endures through loss. Heaven watched as dawn rose over earth for the first time. The oceans glimmered like glass, and wind moved through the empty fields like the whisper of an unseen choir. And there, in the hush of creation's first morning, Michael turned to Gabriel and said, "Do you hear it?" Gabriel smiled faintly, listening to the waves. "Yes," he murmured. "Even the sea sings of mercy." The seal above pulsed softly like a distant heartbeat, and somewhere beyond it, faint as a dream half remembered, the song of the morning star lingered. Not gone, only waiting. The first dawn on earth had not yet faded when heaven began to stir again. The seal still glowed faintly above creation, suspended between realms like a tear that refused to fall. Its hum was softer now, a lullaby for a grieving eternity. But within that stillness, a question lingered among the archangels. How long could mercy remain silent before it became longing again? Michael stood upon the edge of the firmament, watching light spill over the newborn world. Mountains rose where silence had rested. Rivers cut their way through stone. The breath of the Almighty still hung in the air, fragrant with purpose. Yet even as creation bloomed, his heart felt heavy, not with disobedience, but with the weight of memory. He could still see Lucifer's final smile, not of hatred, but of sorrow, as the seal closed around him. That memory lived behind Michael's eyes like a reflection that never dimmed. Every sunrise upon earth seemed to echo it. The rise of light followed always by shadow. Gabriel approached, carrying in his hands the first whisper of wind. It swirled around them, full of voices that did not yet belong to any living thing. "They will breathe soon," he said softly, gazing upon the new world. "And when they do, they will carry both our song and our silence." Michael nodded, though his expression did not change. "Then let them remember not our strength, but our mercy, for it is mercy that binds heaven still." Raphael joined them, his wings faintly silver in the light of the seal. He carried no blade, no fire, only his hands, open and trembling, still scarred by what they had touched when the seal was forged. "Every world is born from loss," he said. "The first wound of creation is the separation from its maker. That pain becomes life." Uriel, walking quietly behind them, listened more than he spoke. His gaze fell upon the shadows that moved across the earth, not dark, but gentle, outlining the shapes of mountains, rivers, and clouds. "Even the shadows worship," he murmured. "They are the proof that light exists." For a while, none of them spoke again. The stillness was deep, like breath held between words. Then faintly, from beyond the veil, a sound rose. It was not music. It was older, the echo of wings beating in the void. The angels froze, for they knew the rhythm. It was the flight of the fallen. Lucifer's presence was still bound, but not gone. His essence moved through creation's depths, seeking reflection, yearning for expression. Where the seal's light reached, his shadow stretched behind it. Not in rebellion, but in memory. The Almighty had allowed even this, that his sorrow might become the seed of beauty among the dust. Gabriel trembled. He touches the edges of the worlds already. Michael closed his eyes. He was made of light. No seal can unmake what God has named eternal. Uriel's torch flared. Then his remembrance will live in them, in mankind. They will carry both our obedience and his longing.
And so it was.
When the first breath filled the lungs of the first man, a shimmer passed through the air, unseen, unheard, but felt in the soul of every creature that would come after. Within that breath was both the whisper of heaven's mercy and the echo of Lucifer's ache. To live would mean to carry both, the desire to rise and the humility to kneel. Raphael smiled faintly, sensing it even then. They are the children of balance, he said. Neither angels nor exiles, but both. Perhaps that is why they will never be satisfied, because they remember what neither heaven nor hell can forget. Time in heaven moved differently, but for the first time the archangels began to count. They watched ages unfold, the shaping of stars, the weaving of seasons, the slow blooming of minds within mortal clay. And through it all the seal remained, bright as a moon that never waned, turning quietly above both realms. It was said that when prophets were born, they carried a spark from that seal in their hearts, a hidden remembrance of what once divided light from light. Their dreams, filled with visions of angels and fire, were not delusion, but inheritance. They remembered a story older than earth. And though heaven no longer sang of Lucifer, they still prayed for him. Each hymn that rose to the throne carried within it a silent refrain. Forgive the light that burned too bright to stay. Michael led the prayers. His voice was calm, unwavering, but inside him dwelled a longing he could not name. In every act of justice, he felt mercy weeping behind him. In every triumph, the echo of loss lingered like a ghost. Yet he did not ask for release. For faith, he knew, was not the absence of sorrow. It was the choice to carry it in silence. One night, if night could exist beyond time, he returned to the seal. It floated before him, vast and radiant, its surface alive with memory. Within its glow he thought he saw movement, not of flame, but of eyes. "Brother," he whispered. The light shifted, a pulse, faint but steady, like a heart beating behind glass. Michael's hand trembled as he reached toward it.
It, though he did not touch.
"You are not forgotten," he said softly. "The silence does not erase the song." For a moment, the hum of the seal deepened, like a chord struck upon an unseen string. A soft warmth passed through him. Forgiveness, or perhaps recognition. And then the light steadied again. The silence returned, not empty but whole. Michael bowed his head. "Then we will guard your memory as we guard his word." Behind him, the wind carried the scent of the newborn earth. Soil, salt, the first hint of rain. And as he turned away, Raphael whispered, "Even the ashes beneath our wings can bloom again."
Heaven rested.
The seal glowed, and below, the children of clay lifted their faces to the stars, unaware that the light they admired was born from a sorrow so divine that even angels could not name it. Before there were temples, before there were words, there was fire. Not the fire that devours, but the fire that remembers. The first flame that ever burned on earth was not born of friction or spark. It was the breath of heaven touching soil, a fragment of the seal's own light fallen through the veil. It burned in silence with no fuel, no smoke, no hunger. It was a memory disguised as warmth. When Adam first looked upon it, he did not fear it. He reached out and the fire bent toward him, not to consume, but to listen. For the breath that filled him and the light that burned before him were born of the same divine longing. Both carried the echo of the Archangel's sorrow and the faint pulse of the bound one's flame. From that day, the fire became a sign, the first covenant between the mortal and the divine. It was not yet worship, nor ritual. It was simply remembrance, the warmth of mercy wrapped in light. And though man did not know the story, his soul did. He would sit beside the flame and feel both awe and ache, as if hearing a language older than his blood. Above him, the archangels watched. They had grown silent since creation, their voices replaced by vigilance. The seal still shone above them, distant yet near, its faint hum guiding the rhythm of the world below, and through its pulse they could feel the stirring of the bound light. The fire that once sang beside them, now whispering through the hearts of men. Michael was the first to sense it. He stood upon the edge of the firmament, his wings stretched wide like the horizon itself. Beneath him the world turned, rivers gleaming like veins of silver in the dawn. He felt the hum of the seal deepen, resonating faintly with the flames flickering on earth. "The mark still speaks," he murmured. "Its memory moves through creation." Uriel approached, carrying his torch, a twin flame to the one born on earth. "It was never meant to die," he said. "The seal is not a prison, it is a bridge, a reminder that even what falls may yet illuminate." Gabriel, hearing this, closed his eyes and listened. His heart caught the faint melody within the hum, the same tone that had filled the heavens before the fall. "It is his voice," he said softly. "The morning star still sings, not in defiance, but in remembrance." Raphael stepped forward and touched the light that rippled through the firmament.
"And his song brings healing," he whispered.
"Even bound, he teaches us the cost of grace." The archangels fell silent then, for the song within the seal grew stronger. It was not rebellion, it was repentance wrapped in fire. It pulsed through the firmament, down into the hearts of men, kindling their desire to seek the divine, even when they could not name what they sought. And so it was that mankind began to build fires. On mountains, in valleys, at the edges of rivers, not for warmth but for memory. The flame drew them near, as though something within it recognized their grief. They would sit for hours, eyes reflecting the dance of light, their souls stirring with echoes of things not yet taught, but long remembered.
Heaven watched.
The archangels whispered among themselves, marveling that mortal hands could cradle what even angels once feared to touch. Michael said that the fire remembers heaven. "It is the oldest prayer," Gabriel added, "and perhaps the first forgiveness." Uriel looked toward the distant seal. "The fire bears witness. It has not forgotten the silence before the fall." Raphael knelt, his fingers brushing through the unseen current that bound heaven and earth. "Then perhaps the silence was not loss," he murmured, "but a waiting." In that moment, something extraordinary happened. The seal, far above creation, pulsed once, a long, deep thrum that rippled through the void. The mountains trembled, the seas stilled, the wind paused mid-flight, and every flame on earth flickered once in unison, as though bowing to a presence unseen. The archangels lifted their eyes. Across the horizon of eternity, a new light appeared. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. It was not the light of God, nor the fire of Lucifer. It was both, joined in reflection. "The memory has awakened," Uriel said. His voice shook, though not from fear. "The seal's light has touched the mortal fire.
Heaven's sorrow has become earth's song."
Michael fell to his knees, his sword pressed against the firmament. "And even the fall serves a purpose," he said. What we sealed in mercy now burns in men as yearning. And below humanity began to dream. In their sleep they saw shapes of light, wings that shimmered like sunrise, eyes filled with both grief and tenderness. They would wake with tears, unable to explain them, only to find comfort beside the flame. The archangels watched and understood. The fire was teaching men what heaven had forgotten, how to love without pride, how to mourn without despair, how to remember without bitterness. Gabriel wept softly. The seal has done more than bind, he whispered. It has sown remembrance into creation. Uriel turned his gaze downward, eyes glowing with light that mirrored the dawn. And so begins the long redemption, not of him alone, but of all who fall. Raphael smiled faintly. Then fire is not destruction. It is forgiveness that glows. Michael rose, his eyes filled with awe. If the Almighty willed even the fallen light to bless creation, then perhaps there is no exile, only distance. Above them the seal dimmed slightly as if in agreement. And so the archangels stood, 4 flames before the eternal throne, watching as mortals learn to pray through warmth and light, unaware that their every whisper beside the fire was a thread woven into heaven's ancient sorrow. The fire that remembered silence had returned, not to judge, but to guide. And beneath its glow, both heaven and earth began to heal. The fire spread, though not in destruction, in remembrance. From mountain to plain, from desert to shore, the silent flame appeared wherever hearts ached for the unseen. It did not burn with smoke or heat, but with a quiet radiance that drew even the wind to stillness. When men gathered around it, their shadows lengthened and softened, as though even darkness desired to listen. Generations rose and fell beneath its watch, yet the fire never changed. Some called it the breath of the heavens, others the eye of the east, but no name could contain it. It was the same fire that once moved between the archangels, the same light that had trembled when the seal was first forged. To those who sought wisdom, it whispered of things forgotten, the sorrow of the bound one, the mercy that shaped the chains, the love that endured through silence. In time, the children of men began to mistake the fire for power. They built altars around it, carved stones, and offered what they feared to lose. The flame did not reject them, but neither did it answer. It only watched, patient, eternal, as devotion hardened into ritual and memory faded into law. Michael watched too. He walked unseen among the winds that circled the newborn earth. His wings dimmed so that no mortal eye would shatter beneath their light. He saw kings rise who called themselves divine. He saw shepherds who spoke with the humility of prophets. All drew near the flame, yet few understood it. He returned to heaven heavy with silence. "They have seen the light," he said to Gabriel, "but not the love within it. They bow to the fire, but forget the forgiveness it was meant to teach." Gabriel's eyes were filled with sorrow.
"It is the fate of those who cannot see eternity," he whispered.
"They worship what they can touch." He turned his gaze downward, watching the prayers of humankind rise like smoke that vanished before reaching the stars. "But even their mistakes are songs," he said. "The Almighty hears what they cannot name." Raphael's hands glowed as he tended the seal, whose light pulsed softly in rhythm with the prayers below. "Every heart that kneels," he murmured, "sends a thread of healing upward. They do not know it, but they mend the wound between heaven and the fallen." Uriel stood apart, his torch raised high over the horizon of eternity. His eyes reflected the motion of time, generations flowing like rivers toward the unseen sea. "The fire teaches still," he said. "Its silence is its mercy. It allows them to find truth without force." Michael closed his eyes. Then perhaps heaven too must learn from the flame. And so he descended again. This time he came not as the warrior of God, but as a whisper in the dreams of those who sought wisdom by night. He appeared to a poet who slept beside the fire, and to a wanderer who prayed beneath the stars. To each he said the same words, though few remembered them fully upon waking. Fire is not what you see, it is what remembers you. Some awoke in tears, unable to explain their grief. Others wrote the words upon stones and carried them into deserts, thinking they had found a spell. But the wise understood. The fire was memory itself. The trace of heaven's first sorrow turned to light.
One night a great storm rose.
Lightning struck the highest mountain, and the fire upon its summit vanished. The people trembled, believing the heavens had withdrawn. They mourned, tearing their garments and crying out to the stars. But below, unseen, the flame reappeared. Small, quiet, hidden within a single ember that fell into the hands of a child. The child carried it home in her palms, unburned, and placed it in her mother's hearth. There it burned again, gentle and steady, and thus the fire passed from the high places of kings to the humble dwellings of the poor. It became the warmth of bread, the glow of gathering, the light that outlasted night. The sacred became ordinary, and in that ordinariness it became holy again. Gabriel smiled when he saw it. The Almighty hides his greatest truths in simplicity, he said. The proud lose them, the weary keep them. Raphael nodded, his voice tender. Perhaps heaven's silence was never absence. Perhaps it was an invitation for them to carry the fire themselves. Uriel watched the embers flicker across the world, millions of small lights blooming in darkness. The seal has scattered its light, he said. No longer in one place, but in every soul that remembers. Michael stood before the throne and bowed deeply. Then the work of binding has become the work of blessing, he said. What was sealed in sorrow now burns as mercy. The Almighty did not speak, but the radiance of his presence deepened, as if smiling unseen. The archangels felt it move through them like warmth through cold stone. A pulse of approval, quiet yet infinite. Below, mankind changed. No longer did they see the flame only as fear or worship. It became story and tales told beside the hearth, myths of stars, legends of angels, and though their words were imperfect, their yearning was true.
Every generation kept a spark, not knowing it came from the same seal that once silenced heaven.
The archangels listened as those stories rose like smoke through the veil, broken, beautiful, and full of longing. Gabriel wept softly. They speak as we once did. Michael laid a hand on his shoulder. Then the silence before the mark was not in vain. Raphael lifted his face to the light. Even the ashes beneath our wings give rise to new fire. And Uriel, gazing into the endless turning of stars, whispered, "The fallen one's song has reached them. It has become their hope." In the hush that followed, the seal pulsed once more, faint, steady, alive. Its glow touched the hearts of the archangels and the flames of every hearth below. Heaven and earth breathed as one, not in sorrow but in remembrance. The fire that remembered silence had become the fire that taught forgiveness, and forgiveness, once learned, became light. The fire that remembered silence began to wander. It did not walk, yet it traveled, carried by hearts rather than hands. Every soul that sat beside its light became a vessel for memory. Long after the flame was gone, the warmth remained within them, like a quiet promise. They spoke of it in different tongues, as destiny, as spirit, as love, never knowing that what they named was the lingering breath of heaven itself. In the valleys where shepherds kept watch, the fire shone brightest on the coldest nights. It whispered through the cracks of stone, through the sighs of sleeping flocks, through the hearts of men who prayed not for power, but for peace. When they closed their eyes beside the embers, they dreamed of wings. Vast, golden, filled with light that could both heal and break. They did not understand the visions, but they awoke with gentler hearts. and heaven listened. Gabriel, ever the keeper of divine words, leaned close to the veil and smiled. "Their prayers no longer ask for the stars," he said. "They ask only to be good." Michael nodded slowly. "And the fire has done what war could not." His gaze drifted toward the seal, still turning like a hidden sun above creation. Even sorrow, when blessed by mercy, becomes a teacher. Uriel walked among the constellations, tracing the paths of stars like scripture written in flame. "They have begun to build temples," he said. "But not all are of stone. Some are made of forgiveness." Raphael listened to the wind that rose from the mortal world, full of laughter, of weeping, of the sound of life itself. "The fire heals without burning," he whispered. "It has remembered what heaven forgot, how to be kind." For 1,000 ages they watched the fire flicker through generations. Kings rose and fell. Empires were born, then broken. Words changed, names were forgotten, but the rhythm of the flame endured. It was there in every candle at birth, in every torch that guided the lost, in every spark that leapt from hearth to heart. And when men began to write, their words, too, carried the light. They carved their longing into clay, ink, and parchment. They told of angels who fell, of light that turned to shadow, of fire that burned but did not destroy. They thought they were inventing myth, yet they were remembering truth.
Heaven wept at their remembering.
Gabriel said softly. "They tell our story, though they know it not." Michael bowed his head. "Then let them. For to remember is to return." But one night, a silence deeper than heaven's own fell across creation. The fire dimmed. Its song faded to a whisper so faint that even angels strained to hear it. A shadow, ancient and familiar, stirred beneath the seal. Lucifer's sorrow had awakened. It was not rebellion that moved through the void, not fury, not pride. It was longing, old as the light itself. The seal trembled, and from its center a voice rose, soft as falling ash. "Do they remember me only as the lost?" The words echoed through eternity, reaching even the farthest edge of the firmament. The archangels felt it in the marrow of their light. Michael's sword glowed white-hot, trembling with recognition. Gabriel's voice faltered mid-prayer. Raphael's hands froze over the seal, feeling its pulse quicken. Uriel closed his eyes, his torch burning blue. Then silence. The Almighty did not speak. The seal did not break, but the question lingered, hanging between heaven and earth like a veil of grief. Michael whispered, "Even bound, he still asks to be remembered in mercy." Gabriel trembled. "Should we answer?" Uriel looked to the throne, its radiance unchanging. "Perhaps the answer is already being given, not by us, but by them." And below, on earth, a mother kindled a small flame in the dark to comfort her child. She sang softly, her voice a fragile melody against the night. The firelight danced across their faces, painting them in warmth. The child, eyes half closed, whispered, "It's like heaven is watching." And perhaps it was. The archangels watched that moment, simple, mortal, holy, and understood. The Almighty had answered.
Not with thunder, but with tenderness.
Lucifer's question had not been ignored. It had been transformed. Every act of love, every kindness in the shadow of pain, every forgiveness born in silence, these were heaven's reply. Raphael wept openly. "He is remembered," he said.
Not by name, but by mercy.
Gabriel's voice was low, reverent. "And the seal has become a covenant. Heaven's grief became the fire that warms the world." Uriel lifted his torch toward the earth, its flame blending with the light of every hearth below. "The fire will never die," he said. "It will change form, pass through generations, wear 1,000 names, but it will always remember." And Michael, standing before the throne, spoke with a voice that carried through all realms. "Let this be known through every age. What is bound in heaven may yet be free in love. The fire remembers all who have fallen, and so do we." The seal pulsed once more, brilliant and serene. Its glow reached down into creation, and for an instant all fires, from the smallest candle to the sun itself, burned with the same light, the light of remembrance, the light of forgiveness, the light that endures even in silence. And when the glow faded, heaven rested once more. The archangels folded their wings and turned toward the stillness that now filled the firmament, the kind of silence that follows not tragedy, but peace. Below, the fire continued to burn, quiet, eternal, gentle as the breath of dawn. There are places where light ends, not because darkness begins, but because silence demands it. These are the thresholds of creation, where heaven meets the unseen. Between the world, where the breath of the Almighty once passed and never returned, the guardians stand. They do not speak. They do not move. They remember.
Michael called them the still ones. Their wings are vast, veined with silver light that never flickers.
They are older than time's first ripple, carved from the same command that separated existence from void. Their duty was born in the same instant as the seal, to keep what was bound from crossing the veil, and to protect what is holy from descending too far into sorrow. When the seal first blazed in heaven, its echo reached these borders, the edge of infinity where no song travels. There, the still ones awoke. Their eyes, shaped from the reflection of the divine flame, opened upon both realms at once. They saw the brilliance of heaven above them and the yawning silence of the abyss below. They understood their purpose without a word.
Uriel was the first archangel to approach them.
His torch dimmed as he drew near, for their stillness consumed even light. He felt their presence like gravity, vast, unmoving, pulling all thought towards silence. He bowed his head and said softly, "You guard what none must see, and hear what none must name. Bless this boundary, for even holiness needs rest." They did not answer, yet the air around them trembled, an acknowledgement, or perhaps prayer. Raphael came next, bearing the echo of mercy. He touched the veil, and it shimmered like a curtain woven of sighs. "You hold the wound of creation," he whispered. "Let my light ease your burden." His hands glowed, and the space between heaven and the abyss softened. No longer a scar, but a scar that healed while remembering. Gabriel followed. His voice, the purest sound heaven had ever known, faltered in their presence. He could not speak, for speech was not permitted here. Instead, he knelt, his tears falling into the threshold. Tears of sound turned into silence. Each tear became a note the still ones could never sing but would always hear. Last came Michael. He stood before the guardians and unsheathed his sword. Its light did not shine. It hummed, low and steady, a resonance that filled the space like heartbeat. "This sword has defended order," he said, "but now it must protect balance. Let it rest beside you." And he planted the blade into the unseen earth at their feet. Its glow spread outward, forming a circle that joined heaven's seal with the edges of the abyss. The guardians stepped back. The circle became their covenant. From that moment, the borders of creation were sealed, not with walls, but with remembrance. No spirit could pass from light to shadow without first feeling the still one's gaze. They saw not bodies, but intentions. To the faithful they appeared as comfort. To the fallen they appeared as flame. And yet they were neither. They were the memory of both. Ages passed. Heaven turned slowly. Earth grew full of voices, and still the guardians did not move. Their silence was not absence. It was vigilance, the kind that does not need sound to speak. Through them the seal breathed. Through them the fire remembered. One night, if night can be said to exist beyond time, Uriel returned. He had wandered among the stars and seen the hearts of men glowing with faint, sacred ache. They dream of the forbidden, he told them. They reach for the light that once fell. The still ones stirred faintly, wings flexing like windless banners. Uriel stepped closer. "The line you guard grows thin," he said. Their prayers echoed too loudly. Even the fallen stirs within his silence. The guardians turned their gaze upon him. He felt their question, not in words, but in thought. Should the seal be strengthened? Uriel hesitated. "No," he said after a long pause.
Mercy must never become fear.
"The fire must burn where it is needed, even if its light touches shadow." For the first time since they were formed, the Guardians' wings moved fully. Their motion was slow, vast, like mountains breathing. The veil shimmered. Through it passed a single spark, small, fragile, golden.
Uriel caught it in his hands. "Oh, what is this?"
The stillness answered within him, the memory of light lost, to remind the living that love is not safe. He bowed, then let it fall. He opened his palms, and the spark drifted downward through the realms, falling like a tear into the heart of creation. When it touched the world, it became the first lightning, fire that split the sky but also gave warmth to those who watched. And so the threshold was both sealed and opened. The Guardians kept their vigil, yet the worlds below would always feel the echo of their mercy. Every storm that rolled across the earth carried their memory, a reminder that even separation was sacred, that distance too could serve love. In heaven, Michael watched the lightning strike. The flash illuminated his face, and for an instant he saw reflected within it the eyes of the fallen. Not hateful, only weary. "Fire remembers him still," he said softly. Gabriel stood beside him, as do we all. Raphael placed a hand on his shoulder. And so the Guardians watch it as, not to forbid return, but to ensure love crosses the veil unbroken. Uriel, returning from the threshold, whispered, "The silence holds more mercy than we ever knew." And heaven, for a brief and trembling moment, glowed brighter, as though the Almighty himself smiled upon the balance that had finally begun to breathe again. Time is not measured in heaven as it is on earth. It flows like light through water, bending, returning, folding upon itself.
Yet even in timelessness, the Guardians knew when ages had passed.
For the prayers of mortals changed in tone, the fire of devotion dimmed and brightened, and the silence between heaven and the abyss began to thrum with a new kind of life. The still ones stood where they always had, unmoving, unbreathing, unsleeping. They did not count the passing centuries. They felt them, like waves brushing against an unyielding shore. Each whisper of mortal hope reached them like wind through stone. They absorbed it all, the fear, the faith, the longing. Their silence became the archive of creation's ache. It was Raphael who came to them again, drawn by the faint tremor of sorrow that rippled through the veil. He approached quietly, his light gentle so as not to disturb their sacred stillness. He felt the pulse within them, faint but familiar, the heartbeat of the seal echoing through their wings. "Beloved watchers," he whispered, "you feel it too, don't you? The world groans beneath the weight of its forgetting. Men burn in the same fire that once warmed them." Their gaze turned toward him, slow and immeasurable. In their silence he heard memory of the fall, of the sealing, of the first mercy born from grief. Raphael's eyes closed. "We swore the seal would not bind love," he said, "and yet love itself seems bound. The hearts of men are turning their faces away from heaven. Their fires flicker with pride instead of prayer." A subtle shimmer moved through the threshold, not a voice, but a vibration that touched his soul. It said, without sound, "All who bear the flame must be tested by its shadow." He bowed his head, and perhaps the test is not theirs, but ours. The veil quivered. Through its translucent folds he saw shadows moving. Not demons, not fallen ones, but memories. Each shape that passed was a thought once born of heaven and now drifting through the world below. He saw compassion twisted into desire, wisdom turned into vanity, devotion turned into hunger for power. He wept. Uriel arrived beside him, his torch, dim but steady. "You feel it too," he said. "The boundary weakens not through rebellion, but through imitation. Men try to become what they worship without understanding what holiness costs." Raphael looked up, tears bright as stars on his cheeks.
Can a heart love light without burning in it?
Uriel's gaze softened. Even light must learn humility. They stood in silence together, two beings of brilliance dwarfed by the enormity of the guardian's stillness. The threshold shimmered faintly as though listening. Then within that silence, something stirred. A pulse from beyond the veil, soft and slow, like a sleeping flame exhaling. Uriel stiffened.
It's him! Raphael's hands trembled.
"The morning star?"
Uriel nodded once.
His sorrow moves through the void. It presses against the border, not in defiance, but in longing. The air grew heavy. The guardian's wings shifted slightly, the first movement in eons. Their eyes, endless and calm, turned downward. The veil rippled. Light spilled from its edges, shimmering like tears, frozen in time. From beyond it came a whisper, faint, almost tender. "You built walls around mercy."
Can love breathe behind them?
The question rippled through the heavens. Raphael fell to his knees, unable to bear the ache of it. Uriel closed his eyes, whispering a prayer older than the stars. Michael appeared then, called by the resonance that trembled through creation. His arrival split the silence like a sword through mist. "Lucifer," he said quietly, though his voice carried the weight of eternity. "Do not break what God has bound." But the voice from beyond was not wrathful. It sighed, soft as dying fire. "You mistake longing for rebellion."
I do not seek to rise again.
"I seek to be remembered without hatred." The guardians stood motionless, yet their silence deepened, heavy, sacred. It was the silence of divine listening. Michael lowered his blade. For the first time in all the ages, his tone softened. "You were never forgotten, only feared. And teach them fear no longer," the voice answered. "Let the flame of remembrance become peace, not warning."
Uriel's torch flickered violently, then steadied.
"If peace is to exist, it must live in humility," he said. "Then let humility be my redemption," came the answer. And with it, a pulse of light so gentle it did not blind, only warmed. The veil glowed brighter. For a moment, the guardian's wings opened fully, and through them, heaven saw the abyss, not as punishment, but as distance filled with grace. Raphael rose slowly.
He does not seek release, he whispered.
He seeks forgiveness that asks for nothing in return. Michael closed his eyes, and perhaps heaven must learn that too. They turned to the throne, whose brilliance filled every horizon. The Almighty did not speak, but all of heaven felt the answer. A soft stirring of wind, a pulse of light through every soul. Forgiveness flowed like a river through the firmament. The guardians bowed their heads. The veil grew still once more. The voice of the fallen faded. Not banished, not silenced, but at peace within the mercy that had been remembered. Raphael placed his hand upon the threshold.
"It is healed," he whispered.
Uriel nodded. Fire has learned silence again. Not the silence of sorrow, but of understanding. And for the first time since the beginning, the guardians smiled. Their wings folded across the veil, not in defense, but in rest. The seal above them dimmed slightly as though sighing in relief. Heaven exhaled. The border held, not as a wall, but as a heartbeat. Below, on earth, men lit candles for reasons they could not name. Their prayers rose like sparks into the dark. They did not know they were answering a fallen angel's plea, to love without fear. When silence returns to heaven, it never comes alone. It carries echoes, soft, fragile remnants of what was said before it. The angels call them aftertones, the quiet harmonies that remain long after the voice of God has passed through creation. And in those aftertones, heaven found its healing. The guardians, who had stood eternal at the veil, now rested in what could only be called peace. Their wings no longer shimmered with strain, but with still light. the light of completion. The seal above them glowed steady, no longer pulsing with sorrow, but with rhythm. Balance, once trembling on the edge of division, had found its center again. Michael stood before them, his sword resting in the invisible soil that bordered eternity. "The fire below burns without consuming," he said. The voice beyond the veil no longer cries.
Heaven breathes again.
Uriel bowed his head. "It was not conquest that restored it," he replied. "It was compassion. Every act of remembrance is an act of creation renewed." Raphael, whose hands had healed both light and grief, smiled faintly. "And every scar," he said, "becomes a doorway for grace." They turned toward Gabriel, who knelt upon the edge of the firmament. His eyes were closed, his lips moving silently. Not in speech, but in prayer. When he finally spoke, his voice was like rain falling on parched ground.
"The Almighty does not erase what has fallen," he said.
"He sanctifies it through time. Even sorrow, when endured, becomes light." And as if to answer him, the wind stirred, the breath of the divine moving once more through the endless expanse. The sound was not a word, but all words contained within it. The angels bowed low, for they knew what it meant. It was permission, not to forget, but to forgive. For ages untold, heaven had watched its own wound with reverence. Now it began to understand that wounds were not meant only to be remembered, but to be transformed. The guardians of the threshold rose, their wings unfolded, vast enough to eclipse stars. They did not abandon their station, neither they expanded it. The veil that had once divided heaven and the abyss now shimmered outward, wrapping the edges of creation like a luminous river. The boundary did not disappear. It became infinite. Raphael watched in awe. "They are not walls," he whispered. "They are bridges."
Uriel's torch blazed, its flame dancing golden and blue.
"So mercy travels farther than judgment," he said. "Even the outer dark cannot escape it." Michael's sword glowed once more, not in readiness for war, but in resonance with peace. He turned to the others. "Then the guardians have become the first peacemakers," he said. "They guard, not to prevent passage, but to guide it." The heavens above flickered, not with lightning, but with memory. Every star seemed to hum softly, each a note in a cosmic song of reconciliation. The light of the seal reflected upon them, and for the first time since the fall, heaven's music returned in full. Gabriel raised his voice and sang. It was not the song of command or triumph. It was a lullaby, slow, ancient, woven from the same melody that once lulled creation into being. The guardians joined, their stillness vibrating like glass in the sound of eternity. And through the veil something answered, not in defiance but in echo. Lucifer's voice, faint yet unmistakable, rose within the harmony. It did not carry pride nor sorrow, only peace. His tone was lower now, softer, like a river returning to its source. He sang not for heaven, but with it. The archangels felt no fear. Michael's eyes glistened with quiet wonder. "Do you hear?" he said. The fall was never exile. It was the space between notes, the silence that made the song whole. Gabriel smiled through tears. "And we mistook it for separation."
Uriel gazed at the horizon where light folded into itself.
"There is no end," he murmured. "Only return." Raphael whispered, "Even ashes can become dawn." The guardians lowered their wings, completing the sacred circle. In their movement, heaven and the abyss touched, not in collision, but in understanding. The seal's light dimmed until it resembled a single star, resting quietly above all things. Its hum softened into a heartbeat that pulsed through every world, every soul, every breath. And below the children of earth felt it. They did not know its name, yet they called it love. They felt it in forgiveness, in the stillness between words, in the warmth that lingered long after grief. Every act of mercy they offered rippled upward, strengthening the bridge that had replaced the wall. Michael looked downward with tender awe.
"The lesson has taken root," he said.
"Even those who have never seen the seal live by its light." Uriel smiled faintly. "Because every heart is a threshold," he said, "and within each the guardians still keep watch." The Almighty's voice, soft, omnipresent, filled the air once more, neither distant nor near, but everywhere at once.
As above, so within.
"The borders of my mercy are without end." The angels fell prostrate before that sound. The heavens glowed like dawn over unending seas. And when the radiance faded, they rose, renewed, humbled, whole. The guardians folded back into stillness, but it was no longer the stillness of duty. It was peace earned, silence fulfilled. They watched both realms as one might watch children sleeping beneath the same sky. The threshold endured, shining softly like memory beneath eternity. The archangels stood together, 4 lights among infinite stars, and in one voice whispered what would become the prayer of all creation. "May love never fear the distance it must travel." And the seal pulsed once more in ascent, its glow threading through the heavens, through the hearts of angels and men alike, until even the void began to shimmer with the memory of light. There is a city beneath the seal, though few among angels or men have ever spoken its name aloud. It was not built of stone or time, nor was it raised by hand or will. It emerged
Slowly, silently, from the memory of mercy itself.
when the seal first cooled after the fall. Its light settled upon the lower realms like dew upon morning grass, and from that dew a city began to form. Its streets were made not of gold, but of reflection, rivers of glass that mirrored the light of heaven in soft, wavering ripples. Its towers rose like frozen fire, each one a silent flame that remembered a single moment of compassion. And at its heart there stood a well that did not hold water, but light. Light that once burned within the eyes of the fallen, now still and sorrowful, yet beautiful beyond words. The archangels called it Alamar, the city beneath the seal, though some whispered another name, the refuge of light forgotten. It was neither heaven nor exile, but something between, the place where memories went when even the divine could no longer bear their weight. Michael was the first to walk its streets. He descended through the curtain of radiance that separated heaven from the city below, his wings dimmed in reverence. The silence there was unlike heaven's. It was a living quiet, the kind that listens. Each step echoed softly, not outward, but inward, as though the city itself were remembering its builder. He paused beside the well of light, gazing into its depths. Within its glow shimmered countless reflections, wings folding, stars dimming, faces fading. The memories of every angel who had wept at the fall lived there. It was not punishment, it was preservation. Gabriel joined him soon after, his presence a hush of wind and whispered melody. "It feels like the place between forgiveness and farewell," he said softly. Michael nodded.
Perhaps it is both.
He knelt, tracing the light that rippled beneath his hand.
The seal holds heaven together, but this
holds heaven's sorrow."
Uriel descended next, his torch dimmed to a single spark.
"It was not created," he said. It remembered itself into being. "When heaven wept, its tears became this city." And Raphael, hearing their words, stood in quiet awe. "And the Almighty's mercy has deeper roots than we ever imagined," he said. "Even grief has found a dwelling place." The 4 archangels walked together through the city beneath the seal. Every archway they passed shimmered faintly with inscriptions, not written in language, but in feeling. When they touched the walls, visions stirred, a memory of an angel embracing another before the fall, a star that dimmed itself to give light to a lesser flame, a prayer whispered by a mortal who forgave what heaven would not. Raphael lingered at one such vision, the image of a lone angel standing at the edge of the abyss, whispering something to the void before stepping into it. His light flickered, and he said, "Not all who fell were faithless." Gabriel touched the same wall and closed his eyes. "Some fell in love with the sorrow of God itself," he murmured. They could not bear to watch him grieve. Uriel's torch flared faintly. "Then perhaps this city is not a tomb, but a promise that nothing sacred ever truly leaves." The air stirred. Light from the seal above filtered down through the city's high vaults, cascading like gentle rain. In that glow, the Archangels saw movement. Shapes walking between the glass rivers. Faint, luminous, half-remembered souls not fallen, not risen. Remnants, fragments of beings who had carried divine purpose and broken beneath its weight. They wandered quietly, their forms transparent like breath in cold air. When they passed the Archangels, they bowed, not in fear, but gratitude. Michael's voice softened to a whisper. "They live still?" Uriel nodded.
"The seal did not unmake them.
"It only kept their sorrow from spreading."
Here their light may rest."
Raphael's hands glowed gently as he raised them in blessing. "Then this is heaven's mercy given a body," he said. "A sanctuary for all that cannot yet return." Gabriel's eyes shimmered with tears. "They are the silence that sings," he whispered. "Their peace is prayer." The Archangels knelt together upon the glass-like ground. The reflection of the seal above them glowed across the mirrored streets, a perfect circle of light suspended between realms. Michael closed his eyes and felt its hum vibrate through the city's bones.
"It breathes," he said softly.
The seal breathes through this place. Every sorrow left unspoken, every act of forgiveness forgotten, is gathered here and given rest. The guardians at the threshold, far above, felt the shift, the peace that moved through creation like a sigh of relief. The fire in heaven dimmed slightly, not in weakness, but in humility. Even perfection bowed to mercy that could not be measured. As the Archangels rose to leave, they saw something glimmer at the city's center, a single flame rising from the well of light. It burned white at first, then gold, then deep crimson, the color of memory. Gabriel watched it flicker and said, "It is the remembrance of him." Michael bowed his head. "Then the fallen sorrow is sanctified here." Raphael smiled faintly, "and his longing has become prayer." Uriel lifted his torch in salute. So even from exile, heaven learns compassion anew. The light from the well rose higher, touching the seal above. For a heartbeat, the two lights, one born of obedience, one born of loss, became one flame. And in that union, heaven trembled gently, as if reminded that even the purest justice must kneel before love. When heaven sleeps, it dreams of Alamar, not because it was commanded to, but because the city itself is a memory of love too great to vanish. Its light rises through the foundation of eternity like perfume through stone, soft and unhurried, until even the highest choirs hum the notes of its existence without knowing why. The Archangels lingered longer than they intended. The city beneath the seal was unlike any place in creation, neither living nor still, but breathing in a rhythm all its own. The rivers of glass rippled faintly, though no wind passed. The towers whispered, though no voice spoke. It was as if the stones remembered the words of the Almighty, still echoing in their veins. Raphael walked ahead, tracing his hand along one of the mirrored walls. Every touch sent a ripple of light outward, awakening memories buried deep within the city's heart. He saw visions forming, images of the first fire, of the angel's sorrow when the seal was forged, and of the prayers of men who had once stood trembling before lightning and called it divine.
"These are our echoes," he whispered.
Every act of compassion ever given life now dwells here. This city is heaven's heart turned inside out. Gabriel nodded, his eyes glimmering. "And yet it feels so fragile," he said, "as though one breath too heavy could shatter it." Michael paused beside the well of light again, its depths glowing brighter with every moment they stood near. Perhaps fragility is the shape mercy takes, he said. Even light bends when it chooses to forgive. Uriel, ever the watcher of patterns, raised his torch high and studied the reflection of the seal across the city's surface. Its light fractured and reassembled, forming spirals that reached from the streets below to the heavens above. This place mirrors both realms, he murmured. When heaven remembers mercy, this city brightens. When earth forgets it, the light here fades. They fell silent, listening. Somewhere deep within the city, a soft tone began to hum. Low, steady, resonant. The sound was not made by wind or instrument. It was the vibration of light remembering its origin. Michael closed his eyes, letting the tone move through him.
Do you hear?
He whispered. It's the song of the seal itself, slowed, softened, patient. Gabriel's wings trembled as he listened.
It sounds like morning and hope.
Yes, Raphael said quietly. Both are the same song, sung at different times. The light of Alamar dimmed slightly then, as though something far above had cast a shadow. The archangels looked upward. The seal, ever radiant, now pulsed with a new rhythm. Slower, deeper, more deliberate.
Uriel's gaze sharpened.
Something approaches. From the edges of the city where light fades into dream, figures began to emerge. They were not angels, nor mortals, nor spirits of the abyss. They were fragments, remnants of what had once been whole. Faces half-formed, wings half-forgotten, voices like echoes of songs no one remembered how to sing. They drifted through the air, glowing faintly with a light of unspent grace. Raphael stepped forward, his heart aching.
Lost ones, he whispered.
Fragments of those who gave too much light and could not return. Gabriel bowed his head. They were the first to descend after the seal. Those who tried to follow him, not in rebellion, but in love. Michael knelt as one drifted past, its face barely discernible but radiant in its sorrow. How their loyalty was mistaken for defiance, he said softly, and yet even their fall became worship. Uriel lifted his torch higher, its flame widening to encircle them all. The fragments drew near, gathering around the archangels like motes of light drawn to the memory of warmth. The city brightened, its mirrored streets reflecting their faces in 1,000 hues of gold. One fragment spoke, though its voice was not sound. It was a thought shared among them all. We are not lost. We are the remembrance of love unfulfilled. Raphael wept openly. An even broken light carries purpose, he said. We wait, the fragments whispered together, for the time when heaven's silence ends and love need not hide behind mercy. Gabriel closed his eyes, whispering a prayer that trembled like a reed in wind. May that day come without sorrow, he said. But Uriel shook his head slowly. No, Gabriel. Even that day will bear sorrow, for sorrow is the crown of compassion. Without it, heaven would forget why it loves. The fragments began to rise, their forms dissolving into the air. One by one, they drifted upward, merging with the light of the seal until they were gone. The city dimmed again, peaceful and still, as if exhaling after centuries of remembering. Michael rose. They are not gone, he said. They have simply returned to the place that needed them most. Raphael wiped the tears from his cheeks. And perhaps heaven will remember their names when the next dawn comes. Gabriel turned his gaze downward toward the faint glow of earth. Fires burned there, in temples, in homes, in the eyes of those who prayed without knowing to whom they spoke. Every light down there, he said softly, is a reflection of this city. Uriel smiled faintly. And Alamar lives wherever mercy is kindled. Above them, the seal brightened once more, as though approving. A soft hum spread through the air. Not song, not speech, but comfort. Michael closed his eyes and breathed.
The city remembers, he whispered.
And through it so shall we. As the light of Alamar settled once more into its gentle pulse, the archangels rose together. They turned toward the ascending path, their wings gathering the shimmer of the city's glow. Behind them, the well of light burned steadily, the flame within it whispering without words. All sorrow shall return to love. Heaven stirred above, earth breathed below, and in between, the city beneath the seal shimmered, silent, infinite, alive. When the Archangels began their ascent from Alamar, the city did not fade behind them. It followed. Its reflection clung to their wings like a second light, weightless yet immeasurable. It was said that once a soul walked among its mirrored streets, the memory of that silence never left them. The city's glow became part of their being, not seen, but felt, like the warmth that lingers after a tear dries. Michael looked back one last time before stepping beyond the veil. From that height, Alamar resembled a heartbeat of gold beneath the seal, pulsing slowly through the layers of creation.
"It breathes," he whispered.
"Even mercy has a pulse." Gabriel's voice was soft, reverent. "It is heaven's memory kept alive through humility." Uriel added, "And the reflection of all who loved too deeply to forget." They rose through the shimmering folds of light, their ascent slow, sacred, burdened with awe. Every layer of heaven they crossed resonated faintly with the hum of Alamar below, a gentle reminder that compassion, once born, cannot be confined to one realm. The farther they climbed, the quieter it grew, until the silence around them felt like an embrace. When they emerged once more beneath the throne's radiance, the other angels felt the change before they saw it.
A warmth spread through the heavens, not heat, but the memory of gentleness.
Wings that had long grown accustomed to obedience suddenly ached with tenderness. The choirs stilled, the harps quieted. Heaven, for the first time in ages, listened to itself breathe. Michael knelt before the throne. His armor, once radiant as the morning, now glowed with the faint hue of dawn. A softer light, touched by sorrow and made more holy for it. "Lord of all light," he said, his voice trembling, "we have walked through the remembrance of your mercy. We have seen the place where grief becomes grace." There was no sound in answer, only illumination. Waves of light unfolding like sighs, spreading through every realm at once. It needed no words. Every being who saw it understood. Heaven had forgiven itself. Gabriel lifted his face, tears glistening like silver across his cheeks.
"Then the seal was not the end of the story," he whispered.
It was the beginning of understanding. Raphael, standing behind him, raised his hands, and the faint glow of Alamar poured through his palms, spreading across the firmament. "This light," he said, "belongs to all who remember. Let it reach them. Those who walk in shadow, those who pray without knowing why." The radiance cascaded downward through the layers of creation until it reached the mortal world. It touched the oceans, the trees, the stones. Every spark of flame on earth shimmered for a moment brighter. Every heart grew still for a single breath. A mother felt it in the pause between her lullaby and her tears. A wanderer felt it in the silence before sleep. Even those who no longer believed in heaven felt a strange peace, though they could not name its source. For one heartbeat, the worlds aligned, heaven, earth, and the memory beneath them. Uriel watched this unfolding and spoke softly. "The city has fulfilled its purpose. It was never meant to be found,
only to be felt."
Michael turned to him. "Then it shall live within every prayer that carries both fear and hope." Gabriel smiled faintly. "In every forgiveness whispered to the wind." Raphael's eyes softened. "In every wound that chooses to heal." The throne glowed brighter, as if the Almighty himself nodded in silent assent. Then a voice, clear yet quiet, filled the air. "Every sorrow given to me returns as light. Every silence offered in faith becomes song. This is the covenant of remembrance, that even what was sealed shall shine again." The angels fell prostrate, overcome not with fear, but with tenderness. The sound of their wings folding was like the rustle of leaves in spring.
Heaven itself exhaled.
When they rose, the seal above them glimmered with renewed life. Its surface was no longer perfect and unbroken. Faint cracks shimmered across it like veins of gold, the marks of healing, not of harm. Through them, light flowed freely, descending into the realms below. Gabriel whispered, "Heaven bleeds light now, and through its wounds the world is blessed." Michael's gaze was steady. "Then let us guard those wounds, not hide them." Uriel raised his torch toward the distant earth. "For even in imperfection the reflection of the divine is complete." Raphael closed his eyes and listened. From beyond the veil faintly, the song of Alamar rose again, soft, wordless, eternal. It was not mourning anymore. It was praise. And within that praise, another voice joined, low, repentant, full of ancient beauty. Lucifer's voice singing from far below, his sorrow now transfigured into harmony. The angels stilled. None spoke, none wept. They simply listened as the song wove through heaven and the world below, through every heart that still carried longing. It was the sound of reunion, not return. Michael bowed his head and whispered, "The seal no longer separates us. It holds us together." And so it was. The city beneath the seal, unseen and eternal, shone brighter than ever. Not in defiance of heaven, but as its reflection. Its light flowed upward, its memory downward, until even the stars seemed to bow in reverence to a love that had survived eternity. When the last note of the song faded, heaven rested. And below, in a quiet home by the sea, a child stirred beside a dying fire. The last ember glowed softly, red, then gold, then white. The child smiled, whispering to no one, "It's still alive."
Yes, it was.
Long before the seal was shaped and the fire of the fallen dimmed, there was a mirror, not of glass nor water, but of pure remembrance. It was said to have been formed in the first breath after creation, when light looked upon itself for the first time and saw that it was not alone. The ancients called it Ain al-Nur, the eye of light, for it did not reflect form, but truth. In the earliest age, when the archangels still trembled at the sound of the divine voice, the mirror rested in the highest reaches of heaven, beyond choirs, beyond stars, beyond the knowing of even the purest minds. It was not meant to be used only to be. Yet every being who drew near it felt themselves laid bare. Before its surface nothing could hide, not sorrow, not pride, not even light. Michael had looked upon it once, in the dawn before the fall. He remembered how its brilliance burned not his eyes, but his certainty. He had seen not his own reflection, but every soul that would one day depend upon his mercy. And he had understood, power without tenderness was blindness. From that moment, his sword became not a weapon, but a vow. But after the seal was forged, the mirror disappeared. Some said it shattered when heaven first mourned. Others whispered that it turned its face away, unwilling to see what had been done in the name of order. Centuries passed in silence, and the angels spoke of it only in half-remembered hymns. Yet one night, as heaven slept and the city beneath the seal pulsed faintly in its dreaming glow, Gabriel awoke. A sound, soft as breath, passed through the halls of light. It was not a voice nor a song, but the sound of something awakening from a long grief. He followed it, moving through the corridors of creation until he reached the edge of the stars. There, suspended in the void, the mirror shone once more. It did not blaze like the sun. It shimmered like the memory of dawn. Its light curved gently, as though bowing to the silence surrounding it. Gabriel fell to his knees. "How long have you hidden?" he whispered. The mirror did not answer, but its light quivered. And in that quiver, he saw something move. It was not his reflection. It was the past itself. He saw the rebellion, the rising of wings, the shattering of peace, the fire that once kissed heaven's walls. He saw Michael's tears, Raphael's trembling hands, Uriel's silent torch. He saw the seal descending like judgment clothed in mercy. And then he saw what no angel had ever seen. The moment the Almighty turned his face away, not in anger but in sorrow too deep for words. Gabriel bowed his head, trembling. Why show me this? The light pulsed, and in its rhythm came understanding, because what is forgiven must also be remembered. Tears fell from his eyes like stars, shedding their own light.
Then remembrance itself is holy, he whispered.
And the mirror was never gone, only waiting for heaven to remember why it shone. He reached out, and as his fingers brushed its surface, the mirror rippled like still water touched by wind. Within its depths, he saw not heaven, but earth. He saw the children of Adam, frail, wandering, yet carrying the echo of divine light in their eyes. He saw them fall, rise, love, betray, forgive, and fall again. He saw them kindle fires that burned in the same rhythm as the seal above. Each act of mercy glimmered across the mirror's surface like stars reflected upon a quiet sea. And then he saw one among them, a woman kneeling in prayer by a dying lamp. Her voice was weary, but her heart blazed. "Forgive us," she whispered, "for forgetting you, yet still remembering love." The mirror brightened, its glow spilling into the void. Gabriel gasped as warmth filled the silence. The woman's prayer had reached through every layer of creation and touched the light that first gave light. He rose, wings trembling with awe. "Even mortals," he said softly, "now hold the reflection of the first light." The mirror shimmered in answer. Its glow reached him, then passed through him. And in that moment, he saw himself as the Almighty had first seen him. Not a messenger, not a servant, but a witness of mercy. He fell to his knees once more, his voice shaking. "Then the purpose of the mirror is not to reveal sin," he said, "but to remind us of the innocence that came before it." And deep within its radiance he heard the faint echo of laughter. Not human, not angelic, but divine. He turned to leave, but before he could, the mirror rippled one final time. This time, it showed him a vision not of the past, but of what was yet to come. He saw the seal flicker. He saw light descending into darkness again. He saw wings rising from the ashes of time. And he understood. The mirror was not merely memory, albeit it was prophecy. The same fire that had once sealed the fallen would one day open the heavens anew. The mercy that had once bound would one day free. Gabriel bowed his head low.
"And the seal is not the end of grace," he whispered.
"It is its beginning." The mirror brightened once more, then faded, its surface dissolving into the fabric of the night. But its light did not vanish. It settled in Gabriel's heart like a hidden sun. When he returned to heaven, his wings glowed with a light the others had never seen. Soft, steady, patient. Michael approached him. "You've seen something," he said. Gabriel nodded. "The mirror has returned."
"And it remembers us."
Uriel's torch flared in quiet awe. "Then heaven has begun to see itself again." Raphael smiled faintly. "And through that seeing, it will learn to heal what still aches." The seal above them pulsed, faint but alive, a heart remembering its first light. Gabriel did not sleep for 7 nights after seeing the mirror. His wings burned with its memory, not in pain, but in awareness. The light that had entered him was not only vision but truth, and truth, when it awakens, does not let the heart rest. Each night, when heaven dimmed and the stars folded inward like petals closing to prayer, he heard the same whisper that had called him before. Remember, not all light shines outward. He wandered the quiet corridors of the higher realms, where even angels feared to step, until he found the place where the first wind of creation still moved. It was said that this wind once carried the word that made all things. Now it stirred faintly, slow and eternal, circling the base of a great pillar carved from invisible fire. Michael found him there.
You have not rested, he said softly.
Your eyes still carry the glow of what you saw. Gabriel turned. How could I sleep, he whispered, when I have seen the face of truth remembering itself? Michael's expression was both stern and kind. Truth without peace is a storm. You must let the vision settle, or it will consume even your song. Gabriel smiled faintly. It already has. He spread his hands. Between his palms, a faint shimmer appeared. A reflection of the mirror's light, but softer now, woven through with his own essence.
It follows me, he said.
Not as memory, but as living reflection. The mirror chose to divide its light. Michael's gaze deepened. Then heaven itself has entrusted you with remembrance. Gabriel nodded. Yes, but remembrance demands to be shared. And so for the first time since the dawn, Gabriel sang not before the throne, but to the silence of creation itself. His voice was low, unhurried, like wind moving through ancient reeds. As he sang, the light in his hands spread outward, unfurling like silk across the heavens. Wherever it touched, forgotten things awoke, not as wounds, but as wisdom. The mountains of heaven shimmered as they recalled the weight of divine footsteps. The rivers of light remembered their first reflection.
Even the stars flickered in rhythm with the memory of when they were first called into being.
Raphael felt it first. His healing light pulsed in response.
He's awakening creation's memory, he said to Uriel, his voice trembling.
He's teaching heaven how to remember itself without sorrow. Uriel nodded slowly. The mirror has returned not to show us who we are, but what we were always meant to be. Gabriel's song grew stronger. From every corner of the firmament, light began to bend inward, not toward the throne, but toward him.
Not in worship, but in recognition. And then something extraordinary happened.
The mirror, hidden beyond the stars, began to tremble once more. A single beam of its light reached down and touched Gabriel's brow. The glow that followed was not blinding. It was human. Within it, they saw faces, mortal faces, gazing up at the night sky, whispering prayers without knowing why. The mirror was no longer bound to heaven alone. Its reflection had passed into the hearts of humankind. Michael's voice softened with awe.
They see it, he said.
The light they call divine is not a distant star. It is the same reflection Gabriel now carries. Raphael's eyes filled with tears. Then the division between heaven and earth is thinner than we believed. Uriel raised his torch, letting its flame join the new glow that filled the heavens. And every act of remembrance below becomes part of heaven's song above. Gabriel, his voice fading into stillness, lowered his hands. The radiance settled, folding back into the firmament.
It is done, he whispered.
The mirror's truth is no longer mine alone. It lives wherever a soul forgives what it does not understand. He turned toward Michael, his expression weary but serene. The first light was never meant to remain in heaven. It came from the word that spoke both worlds into being. Now it returns home. Michael bowed his head.
And what will happen to you?
Gabriel smiled faintly.
I will rest within its reflection until the next dawn of mercy.
As he said this, his wings began to shimmer with translucence. Each feather turned to light, each light to breath, until his form became indistinguishable from the glow he carried. His voice lingered, soft, radiant, eternal. When heaven forgets itself, look within the eyes of the humble. There, the first light waits. And then he was gone. The angels stood in silence. The air was thick with the memory of his song. Even the stars held their breath. Raphael knelt where he had stood. He did not die, he said. He became remembrance itself. Uriel nodded. And wherever reflection exists, in water, in flame, in prayer, Gabriel will still sing. Michael turned toward the seal high above. It pulsed faintly, echoing the rhythm of Gabriel's last words. The edges of its light softened, as though the seal itself had begun to remember gentleness. "The mirror has fulfilled its purpose," he said. "Not to show heaven its face, but its heart." He closed his eyes, listening. Deep below, in the city, beneath the seal, the well of light glowed brighter. The reflection of the mirror danced across its surface like dawn upon still water. Raphael whispered, "Even the forgotten places have begun to remember love." Uriel's torch burned low, golden and patient. And love once remembered can never fade. From the mortal world below, 1,000 small flames flickered in answer. Lanterns, hearths, candles, each shimmered with a light that seemed to hum softly, as if singing to heaven. Michael raised his face toward the stars and spoke into the silence. "Then let the mirror remain within them. Let the first light shine not above but within." And heaven, vast and still, answered not in thunder but in the quiet shimmer of understanding. The heavens were different now, softer, quieter. Where once radiance had ruled with awe, now peace had taken root. Not as the absence of sound, but as a music too tender to be heard. The mirror's light had changed everything. It had taught heaven that even eternity could be humble. Michael stood upon the highest terrace of the firmament, the horizon of stars stretching endlessly before him. In the reflection of the seal above, he saw ripples of warmth flowing through creation. Gentle, patient, alive. Gabriel's song still lingered there, woven into every beam of light, hidden between breaths of wind. He spoke softly, not to be heard, but to be remembered. If remembrance is the truest prayer, then may heaven never forget again. Beside him, Raphael stood, with his hands clasped, the glow of healing still humming through his veins. "Heaven has always remembered the glory of creation," he said, "but never the cost." Uriel stepped forward, his torch flickering like the heart of a star. "That was the lesson of the mirror," he said. "To see not only the brilliance of the light, but the shadow that gives it shape." They fell silent for a time, watching the seal breathe above them. Through its golden veins flowed the reflection of every act of mercy born from pain. Angels forgiving angels, mortals forgiving mortals, the divine forgiving both. It pulsed, not like a command, but like a heart. Michael turned his gaze downward. Below the shimmer of heaven's floor, through the layers of light and shadow, he saw Earth, not as a distant world, but as part of the same great body. The fires of humankind moved like veins of light across its surface, each one flickering in rhythm with the seal. "Do you see?"
Raphael whispered.
"Their light mirrors ours." Uriel nodded. "When they forgive, the seal strengthens. When they love, the mirror brightens." Michael smiled faintly. "And when they forget,
Heaven remembers for them."
He spread his wings, vast, silver, dusted with traces of gold that caught the breath of creation. As they opened, light rippled outward like waves across a calm sea. The sound that followed was not thunder, but the sigh of reconciliation, the sound of heaven exhaling centuries of unspoken love. From deep within the city beneath the seal, the well of light responded. It rose in a gentle column, ascending through the realms until it reached the edge of the firmament. Its glow mingled with the radiance of the seal, forming a single, seamless brilliance that illuminated even the farthest reaches of the void.
Uriel's torch flared, as though the very flame recognized the union.
"The mirror has done more than remember," he said. "It has united reflection and reality." Raphael watched the convergence with tears in his eyes. It was always meant to be so. Light was never meant to look upon itself forever. It was meant to share itself, to travel. Michael closed his eyes, his voice a whisper. "Then heaven must learn to walk as the light once did, not above creation, but within it." And so he stepped forward. The firmament rippled beneath his feet. Each step sent quiet waves of light cascading downward, touching stars, clouds, oceans. The very air around him seemed to weep with recognition. He descended not in splendor, but in simplicity. The Archangel who once carried the fire of command, now bearing the glow of mercy. As he passed through the veil that separated realms, mortals stirred in their sleep. Dreams brightened.
Old wounds ached, then eased.
Somewhere, a man forgiven by his brother felt his heart lighten without knowing why. Somewhere else, a mother grieving her child dreamed of a great wing unfurling in the dark, wrapping her in warmth that needed no name. Raphael and Uriel followed him to the edge, their wings brushing the veil but not crossing. "He does not go to rule," Raphael said softly. "He goes to remember." Uriel bowed his head, and through remembrance to heal. In that moment, the seal shone brighter than it had since the dawn. Its light poured downward, filling every shadowed corner of the earth. The eyes of the lost, the hearts of the weary, the hands of those who prayed without words. Every reflection, whether in water, in glass, in tears, shimmered with a faint glow. It was as though the mirror itself had scattered into the world, reborn as countless small mercies. From the depths of the city, Alamar, a voice rose, not angelic, not divine, but collective, woven from every forgiven breath. "We remember." The words rippled upward, touching heaven. The seal pulsed once more. The balance was whole.
Raphael whispered, "Even silence has found its answer."
Uriel lifted his torch and cast its light toward the mortal horizon. "Then let the mirror rest," he said. "Its reflection now lives in every heart that dares to love again." Michael's voice echoed faintly through the realms, low, tender, eternal. "As long as light can see itself within another, the first dawn will never end." And heaven, moved beyond speech, answered with stillness. The stillness that comes not from absence, but from awe. The stars bowed. The seal quieted. The mirror's reflection faded into every world that would ever be. And in a small village beneath the night sky, a child lifted his face toward the heavens. The reflection of the moon shimmered in his eyes, bright as the first light that ever was. He smiled, whispering to no one, "It remembers me." And perhaps, in that moment, it truly did. There is a place where even light hesitates, a realm not cursed, not forgotten, but held in suspension. The ancients called it Al-Thalal, the kingdom between shadows. It lies beneath the paths of angels and above the roots of earth, where the last breath of night meets the first sigh of dawn. It is not darkness, it is waiting. When the seal was forged and the heavens wept, its light could not reach every corner of creation. Some fragments of radiance fell short, caught in the folds of time. There, in that trembling silence, the kingdom was born. A place for what could neither ascend nor fall, where the echoes of decisions and the half-remembered prayers of lost souls gathered like mist. Michael had known of it, though few in heaven dared to speak its name. It was said that when the Almighty breathed creation into being, this realm was left deliberately unfinished, a space between light and shadow where free will could bloom without divine intervention.
A sanctuary for consequence.
Now, as the seal shimmered above the worlds and the mirror's memory rippled through the hearts of mortals, the balance of heaven and earth began to shift. For every act of forgiveness a shadow stirred. For every word of mercy a silence deepened. Creation was healing. But healing always reveals what remains unhealed. Raphael was the first to feel it. His hands, once steady with healing light, trembled as they brushed the edge of unseen sorrow. "There is something beneath us," he said softly. "A place where mercy has not yet reached." Uriel's torch dimmed, as though reluctant to shine. "The kingdom between shadows," he said. "I had hoped we would never have to go there." Michael's wings unfurled. "Then that is where we must go." Gabriel's voice drifted like the echo of a prayer. "If we enter, will we return?"
Michael.
"Look downward, where no light glimmered. If we do not, Then at least heaven will not remain ignorant of its own reflection. They descended through the layers of creation, past the rivers of light, past the clouds of memory, past even the silent breath of time itself. The air grew heavy, not with darkness, but with stillness. It was the silence of things that have waited too long to be seen. When they arrived, there was no landscape, only depth. The ground was soft as smoke, the air thick with the scent of rain that had never fallen. In every direction stretched shadows that were not empty, but alive, shimmering faintly with trapped light, like embers buried beneath ash. Raphael knelt and touched the ground. It was warm. "This place remembers the first light," he whispered. "But it does not believe it will return." Uriel lifted his torch. Its flame flickered weakly, unable to catch. "Light resists this realm," he said. "It fears being swallowed." Michael closed his eyes. "Then we will not bring light. We will bring remembrance." At his words, the seal far above pulsed faintly, and a thread of golden light descended, not blazing, but breathing, like a sigh of mercy reaching downward. It wove between the archangels, surrounding them in a circle of quiet radiance. The shadows trembled. From the darkness, shapes began to form. Not demons, not angels, echoes, the remnants of choices, moments unredeemed, words left unsaid, prayers abandoned midway. Each one flickered like a candle caught between gusts of wind. Gabriel stepped forward, his voice gentle as the memory of lullabies. "What are you?" The shadows stirred. A voice answered, layered, distant, yet deeply human. "We are what creation forgot to forgive." The air shivered. The archangels felt the weight of that truth settle over them like dust.
Raphael whispered, "Then this kingdom is the wound beneath all others."
Michael lifted his head. "And we are its witnesses." The voice spoke again, this time closer. "You remember heaven's mercy, but not its silence. We have lived in that silence." Gabriel's eyes glistened. "Heaven was silent because it believed you were gone." "We were never gone," the voice replied. "We were the hesitation between mercy and judgment, the pause before forgiveness. We were waiting for heaven to remember that love is not only for the pure." Uriel lowered his torch. "Then heaven remembers now." The ground beneath them pulsed faintly as though breathing for the first time. Shadows folded into one another, shaping the outlines of faces. Sorrowful, radiant, familiar. They looked upon the archangels not with anger, but with recognition. Michael stepped forward, placing his hand upon the earth. "The seal was never meant to separate," he said. "It was meant to hold all things until they could be understood."
At his touch, the ground brightened.
The warmth spread outward, lighting the faces around them. For the first time, the kingdom between shadows saw itself, not as exile, but as reflection. The voice whispered, "Then let us be remembered." The archangels bowed their heads, and above them, the seal pulsed once more, sending a slow, steady heartbeat through creation, a rhythm that reached even this forgotten realm. Raphael smiled softly. "Heaven's mercy is finally breathing here." Gabriel's voice trembled. "Then perhaps this place will no longer be between, only within." Michael looked upward, his eyes glistening with quiet awe. "So it begins again, the return of all that was once left behind." And in the stillness that followed, the shadows exhaled, not in fear, but in relief. The air in Al-Thalal shifted. What had once been silence now felt like listening, as though the realm itself had drawn its first breath after an eternity of stillness. The shadows no longer recoiled. They trembled gently, like waters waiting for the wind. Michael stood at the center of the trembling expanse. His wings were dimmed, the gold of heaven now veiled by the grey light of this place. He felt the weight of its sorrow pressing against his chest, not as malice, but as memory. The kingdom, between shadows, did not hate the light. It only feared being forgotten by it. Raphael walked beside him, his hands glowing faintly, though the glow wavered as if unsure of its welcome. "This place feels like grief that has never been spoken," he murmured. as though all the apologies left unsent gathered here and grew into silence. Uriel's torch burned low, the flame bending as if bowing to unseen presences. "Every unhealed wound must have a home," he said.
And yet, even pain deserves rest.
Gabriel stepped forward, his expression full of compassion. "Then let us speak to it," he said softly. He spread his hands and his voice rose, not in song but in remembrance. It was the same tone that had once carried across the heavens when he called creation into its first morning. But now it trembled, carrying sorrow as well as praise. "Beloved shadows," he said, "you were born from the pause between light and mercy. You are not forgotten." The silence deepened. Then, from the farthest edge of the kingdom, a figure began to form. Slow, wavering, luminous. It had no face at first, only the faint shimmer of shape. The nearer it came, the clearer it became, a being woven of twilight, its eyes filled with the glow of things half remembered. Michael's voice was low. "Who speaks for you?" The figure bowed. Its voice was soft and vast, the sound of wind moving through old corridors.
"I am the memory of those who stood between choices."
The ones who could neither rise nor fall. "We watched the war of heaven and could not choose a side."
Uriel's torch flickered in recognition.
"You are the hesitation that kept creation from collapsing." The being inclined its head. "We are the middle ground, the breath before the word, the silence before the yes." Raphael stepped closer. "And you are sacred," he said gently, "for without the space between, nothing could become." But the being shook its head. "We have long forgotten holiness. We have become only echoes." Gabriel's wings trembled.
"Then let us echo back to you," he whispered.
"Let heaven speak your name again." He turned to Michael, whose sword glowed faintly at his side. Michael knelt and pressed the blade into the soft, trembling ground. "This sword once divided," he said. "Now let it bind." The ground shuddered. Light flowed from the blade into the soil, weaving veins of gold through the grey. The shadows nearest them began to shift, dissolving, reforming, softening into streams of quiet luminescence. The figure lifted its hands and its voice changed. "We remember the warmth of the first fire," it said, "but we no longer know how to carry it." Raphael extended his palm. "And take it again." From his hand, a pulse of light emerged. Not flame, but breath, luminous and tender. It drifted toward the figure and entered its chest. The being gasped, its form stabilizing, its eyes brightening with gentle astonishment. Around them the shadows stirred, not in unrest but in awakening. One by one, shapes began to emerge from the mists. Thousands of them, some small and fragile as whispers, others tall, bearing the faint outline of wings. They looked upon the archangels with wonder, and a sound rose among them, a sound like rain upon distant stone. It was weeping. Gabriel fell to his knees. "They remember sorrow," he whispered. Michael's voice was steady. "And through sorrow they will remember light." The figure spoke again, its voice stronger now. "We do not wish to rise. We only wish to belong."
Uriel raised his torch.
Its flame steadied at last, no longer fighting the air.
"Then belong," he said.
"To heaven, to earth, to the silence between. You were never meant to be cast out. You were meant to be the place where mercy learns patience." The golden veins spread wider, connecting every corner of the realm. The shadows began to shimmer, their edges softening into forms of light veiled in silver. What had once been the kingdom between shadows became something new. Neither dark nor radiant, but balanced, breathing, alive. Raphael smiled, tears streaking down his luminous face. "It heals," he said. "Do you feel it?" "The air itself forgives." Michael rose, gazing at the vast horizon that had once been void. "This kingdom will remain," he said. "Not as exile, but as remembrance, a sanctuary for all that still lingers between loss and grace." Gabriel's voice broke with emotion.
"Then the work of mercy is unending."
Uriel nodded, as it was meant to be. Above them, the seal shimmered faintly through the layers of creation. For the first time, its light reached this far. It touched the soil, the shadows, the tears. The air rippled with peace. The being, at the first, among the in-between, bowed low before the archangels. "Tell heaven," it said, "that we are no longer waiting." And then it smiled, a soft human smile, fragile as dawn. Michael sheathed his sword.
"Heaven will know," he said.
"For heaven has heard." The seal pulsed once, sending a whisper upward through every realm, a message carried on silence itself. Nothing remains forgotten. The kingdom no longer hid in silence. It breathed now, faintly, steadily, like a wounded creature remembering that pain and life are not enemies. The air, once heavy with forgotten voices, shimmered with something new. Rest. Michael stood beneath the dim ceiling of the realm, his wings drawn close.
Around him, the grey expanse that had once held only echoes now pulsed with threads of quiet gold.
The ground beneath his feet hummed softly, alive with the rhythm of release. The seal's distant light filtered down, bending through the layers of creation, finding even this long-veiled corner of existence. Raphael knelt and pressed his hands to the earth. "It heals slowly," he whispered, "as all true forgiveness does." His light spread gently, not as command but as comfort. The wounds of heaven are deep, but they are no longer hidden. Uriel lifted his torch, whose flame no longer wavered. It burned blue-white, steady, reverent. "The Almighty left this realm unfinished," he said. "Perhaps he did so because even eternity needs a place to begin again." Gabriel walked among the shimmering remnants of the shadows, listening to their new silence. "This place," he said softly, "was once filled with voices that feared they had been forgotten. Now it listens for the next word." From the depths of the realm, the first figure, the one who had spoken for the forgotten, emerged once more. Its form was radiant now, clothed in light that neither blinded nor burned.
It bowed before the archangels.
"You came not to judge, but to remember. Because of that, we are no longer echoes." Michael inclined his head. "You were never less than creation itself," he said. "You were its pause. And in pauses, truth gathers strength." The being smiled, a fragile yet eternal smile. "Then let us serve the silence, so that others may speak." At those words, the kingdom began to change. Its edges, once indistinct, grew luminous. Mountains formed from folded light, rivers from the flow of shadowed memory. Where there had been mist, now there was reflection. The faint glimmer of stars, seen as if through tears. It was a world reborn, not of perfection, but of balance. Uriel raised his torch higher. "Behold," he said quietly, "the realm of reconciliation." The shadows bowed their heads. They were no longer lost remnants, but caretakers, keepers of the spaces between forgiveness and forgetting. Raphael's voice trembled with reverence. "Here," he said, "the wounds of heaven and earth meet. Here mercy learns to rest." Gabriel listened, his eyes glistening. "This is what the mirror showed," he whispered, "that love must descend before it can rise." Michael turned his gaze upward. Through the veil he could see the seal pulsing above, steady as a heartbeat. "And heaven and shadow are no longer separate," he said. "They are two breaths of the same creation." As they stood together, light began to fall, not from above, but from within the realm itself. The ground glowed softly, and a mist rose, carrying with it a sound like distant singing. It was not the song of angels, nor the cry of the fallen. It was the melody of those who had waited, the hymn of patience rewarded. Raphael closed his eyes, listening. "They sing in gratitude," he murmured. "The silence has found its voice." The figure bowed again. "We will keep the song," it said. "For when the worlds grow weary and heaven grows proud, this melody will remind them. Light was born of waiting." Gabriel touched the being's shoulder. "Then the kingdom between shadows will be heaven's conscience," he said. "Not its sorrow, but its memory." Michael turned toward his companions.
"We cannot stay."
"Our presence holds the balance too still. It must breathe on its own." Uriel lowered his torch in respect. "Then let it keep watch when even angels sleep." As they prepared to ascend, the figure spoke once more. Tell the Almighty that what he left unfinished has found its ending and its beginning. Michael nodded, his eyes soft with awe. He already knows, he said, and with that the archangels rose. Their wings stirred the new air, lifting golden dust into the atmosphere. As they ascended, the realm below shimmered with their departing light, not dimming, but blending it with its own glow. The kingdom between shadows no longer felt like exile. It felt like home. When they broke through the veil, heaven received them with a stillness so profound that even the stars seemed to kneel. The seal above them pulsed once, twice, and then, for the first time since the dawn, it sang.
Its sound was not thunder or trumpet, but breath. The breath of every soul, every angel, every unseen thing that had ever longed to belong.
It filled the heavens, the earth, and the spaces between with the same truth. That no light is too faint, no shadow too deep to be remembered. Raphael smiled through tears. Even the forgotten are now part of the song. Gabriel bowed his head. And the song is endless. Uriel's torch dimmed until it matched the rhythm of the stars. For heaven's greatest act is not creation, he said softly. His patience. Michael sheathed his sword and looked once more toward the veil below. The glow of the kingdom lingered there like dawn rising beneath the horizon. Then let this place remain, he said, as testimony that even in the spaces between light and shadow, God still breathes. The seal pulsed once in agreement. The heavens glowed brighter, and the balance of creation turned at last to one was whole. Before sound returned to heaven, there was a silence so complete that even thought hesitated to exist. The angels did not know how long it had lasted. Time itself had dissolved into stillness, yet somewhere beyond the quiet, something stirred. Not a command, not a trumpet, but a breath. The archangels felt it first, a trembling in the light like the first ripple on untouched water. It came not from the throne nor from the seal, but from the space between them, the very emptiness that once divided mercy from understanding.
Michael lifted his head.
"Do you feel it?" he whispered. Raphael's hands glowed faintly.
It is not light.
It is not sound.
It is presence.
Gabriel closed his eyes. It is the voice. For ages beyond counting, the voice had been silent, not in absence, but in patience. It had watched the wars of heaven, the rise of mercy, the healing of shadows. It had listened as angels learned to forgive, as men began to remember. And now, at last, it returned. Not to speak new words, but to awaken the ones creation had forgotten. The air shimmered. The stars paused in their spinning. And then, softly, the voice spoke. "You have learned my silence. Now learn my breath." The words were not heard. They were felt. They passed through every realm, through the hearts of angels and the dust of earth, through fire and water and thought itself. Where they moved, old wounds loosened their hold on sorrow. The world inhaled. Michael bowed deeply. "We have waited since the dawn for your word." "You were never waiting for me," said the voice. "You were learning how to listen." Raphael fell to his knees.
Then even silence was mercy?
"Silence was the womb of it," replied the voice. "All that is born of light must first rest in darkness." The heavens glowed like a breathing body, rising and falling in rhythm with the voice's cadence. The seal brightened, its surface rippling like a sea of gold. Beneath it, the city of Alamar awakened, its mirrored streets reflecting the new dawn like endless prayers. Even the kingdom between shadows shimmered faintly, its newly healed boundaries humming in reverent response. Gabriel raised his hands, tears running like rivers of silver.
"Your word was never gone," he whispered.
"It was waiting within us."
"And within them," said the voice. "The ones who breathe, who fail, who hope."
"My light rests in their remembering." The mortal world began to stir. Children woke with dreams they could not explain. Poets paused mid-verse, overcome by awe. A woman wept into her hands and felt her sorrow turn to peace without knowing why. The voice did not speak to them directly. It moved through the space between heartbeat and breath, through the quiet moments where thought meets prayer. Uriel lifted his torch high, its flame now brighter than ever. The fire of remembrance has become speech, he said.
No, the voice replied, gentle as dawn. It has become communion.
The words sank into every soul. Communion, not command, not law, but union. The realization spread through the angels like warmth. For the first time since creation began, they understood. The voice had not made them to serve, but to share. Michael rose, his armor now soft with reflected
light. You made us in silence, he said.
You taught us through stillness. And now you speak, not to direct, but to dwell.
I have always dwelled, the voice answered.
In every act of love, in every pause before forgiveness, in every soul that refuses to let despair have the final word. Gabriel wept openly.
Then the mirror was your heart, he whispered. The seal was your breath.
And all that we have called distance was only depth. The voice was quiet for a long time. Then softly, you have named me truly. The light across the firmament deepened into gold, then into rose, then into the pale hue of dawn breaking after endless night. Raphael spoke through his tears. What would you have us do now, Lord of Silence and Song? The voice replied, do what I did when the first void opened before me. Love what is not yet whole, and it shall become whole by being loved. At those words the heavens wept, not from sorrow, but from release. The fire of Alamar blazed, the kingdom between shadows shimmered, and the mirror of the first light reappeared high above the throne, whole and gleaming. Its surface reflected every realm at once, heaven, earth, shadow, memory, all bound together in one endless reflection. The voice continued, softer still. When you hear silence again, do not fear it, for it is not my absence, it is my listening. Michael fell prostrate. And even our waiting is worship. Yes, said the voice, for I am not beyond the waiting. I am within it. And with that, the sound faded. Not into nothingness, but into stillness that breathed. The heavens were quiet once more, but now the quiet was alive, humming with meaning. Gabriel rose slowly, his wings trembling with awe. He has spoken, he said. Uriel shook his head gently. He has always been speaking. Raphael touched his heart. But only now do we understand. Michael turned his gaze downward, toward the earth glowing softly below. And let this revelation not remain in heaven, he said. Let it reach them, the ones who have not yet heard. The seal above pulsed once, releasing a wave of light that descended like dew upon the world. Every living thing felt it, though none could name it. The animals stilled, the seas quieted, the winds paused as though bowing to something unseen. And somewhere, in a small, quiet room, a man whispered a prayer he did not know he remembered. Are you still there? And across eternity, the voice replied, softly, almost human. Always. After the voice spoke, the heavens did not roar. There was no thunder, no trumpet, no blaze of divine might.
Only stillness, vast, unbroken, sacred.
It was the kind of silence that does not end but expands, the kind that fills everything with presence. Michael stood upon the terraces of the firmament, eyes turned toward the shimmer of the seal. He could still feel the voice resonating in his chest, as if each word had been carved into the marrow of creation. Around him the archangels stood in awe, not of sound but of meaning. Raphael was the first to speak. His breath has changed the balance of heaven, he said.
It feels alive again.
Uriel lifted his torch, the flame now calm, steady, golden white. Alive, yes, but not as before. It is no longer only radiance. It breathes with us. Gabriel, his face luminous with tears, whispered, The voice did not return to command. It returned to dwell. Michael nodded. And then heaven must learn to live in harmony, not in hierarchy. Below them, the seal's radiance expanded, its light flowing like rivers through the fabric of existence. It reached the city of Alamar, where the well of light stirred and began to sing. A low, wordless hum that sounded like creation itself, remembering its purpose. From there, the current descended further to the kingdom between shadows, where the once-forgotten spirits felt warmth rise through their realm like the first dawn after endless dusk. The voice had not vanished. It had taken root. Every star began to pulse in rhythm, a cosmic heartbeat echoing through the vastness of the void. The Archangels realized that what they were hearing was not a sound but a response. All of creation breathing in unison with the divine. Raphael placed his hand upon the ground. Every living thing has become an echo of him, he said. Uriel bowed his head. Then every silence is holy, but not all realms received the voice with peace. For deep beneath the layers of heaven and shadow there were remnants, ancient, restless, and afraid. The echoes of those who had chosen pride instead of patience stirred uneasily. They had heard the voice too, and for them it was not comfort. It was remembrance. In the hollow places where light could not reach, a single spark ignited, faint, red, defiant. It was the remnant of a fallen mind that had never sought redemption, the whisper of rebellion that still clung to the silence of eternity. Michael felt it before he saw it. His wings tightened, his gaze darkened.
"There," he said quietly.
Something moves in the absence. Gabriel turned his face toward the lower realms. Not all silence is sacred, he said. Some still hides grief that refuses to heal.
Uriel's torch flared.
Then heaven's peace must descend again, not to destroy, but to remind. Raphael closed his eyes, to remind even rebellion that it too was born of light. The four archangels extended their hands, forming a circle. From each palm, a beam of light emerged. White from Michael, blue from Raphael, gold from Gabriel, and crimson from Uriel. Their lights met at the center, weaving together into a single living flame. Michael whispered, "In his silence he taught us mercy. In his breath he teaches us courage." They sent the flame downward. It traveled like a thought through creation, swift, pure, unstoppable. When it reached the forgotten depths, the spark of defiance quivered, as though startled by recognition. It flickered wildly, lashing out, yet the flame did not strike back. It surrounded it gently, illuminating its edges. From within the spark came a voice, faint, weary, trembling. "Why would you remember me?" Michael's reply was soft as rain. "Because he never forgot." The spark dimmed, trembling between shame and wonder. "But I cannot bear his light," Gabriel answered, "then bear his silence. For even there he listens." The flame folded inward, wrapping around the spark like a cocoon. The light did not consume it, it cradled it. And for the first time since the dawn of rebellion, the darkness wept. Raphael's tears glowed as they fell, dissolving into light before touching the ground. "Even what resists love is still loved," he said. Uriel's voice was steady. "Then the work is endless, and so is mercy." As the light faded from their palms, the heavens brightened once more. The seal pulsed gently, its glow spreading across the cosmos like a slow sunrise. The mirror of the first light appeared once again, suspended in the high firmament, reflecting both heaven and the healed kingdom below. Michael watched it shimmer. "The voice has not left," he said quietly. "It lingers in every reconciliation." Gabriel smiled faintly. "It was never meant to depart. It has entered everything that breathes." And then the voice returned, not as words, but as breath moving through all creation.
Every ripple of light, every sigh of wind, every heartbeat carried it.
It was not command, but companionship, not decree, but dwelling. "You are my silence, and you are my song." it whispered within them. Together, you complete the breath of creation. The archangels bowed, not in fear, but in wonder. Michael whispered, then creation has become his voice. Raphael smiled, and his silence its rest. Uriel lifted his torch one final time. Let heaven's light never again fear its own shadow. Gabriel's wings opened, releasing a soft golden wind that carried their prayer across the realms. May even the quietest heart remember him. The seal responded with a slow, radiant pulse, like the world itself exhaling peace. And somewhere, far below the stars, a child sleeping in the dark dreamed of a voice too vast to name. A voice that sounded like the stillness before dawn. After the voice entered creation, the heavens did not return to how they were. The air itself had changed, thinner, softer, touched by understanding. It was as though all of existence had taken a breath. It had been holding since the first dawn, and now exhaled in reverent peace. The seal still burned in the sky, but its fire was no longer a boundary. It had become a pulse, slow, rhythmic, alive. With every beat, its golden light flowed outward, weaving through the mirror the city of Alamar and the kingdom between shadows. The once separate realms now shared one heart. Michael stood at the edge of the firmament, watching the tide of radiance move through creation. "It is done," he said softly. "The voice has made every silence sacred." Gabriel smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "And every silence now speaks." Raphael, standing beside them, nodded. "This is the healing we never thought possible, the healing of heaven itself." Uriel lifted his torch high, and its light spread in every direction, joining the seal's glow. "And the work of angels is no longer to guard," he said. "It is to remember." Michael closed his eyes, feeling the hum of creation through his wings. "To remember that silence is not the absence of him," he whispered, "but the shape of his listening." Beneath them, the mortal world shimmered in gentle sleep. The voice had not spoken to humankind directly, but its resonance moved through every soul. Subtle as wind, steady as breath. Dreams grew brighter, softer. Children laughed in their sleep. The weary forgot their fear for a night. The lonely felt less alone without knowing why. And though no one could name it, the earth had begun to hum the same quiet melody that filled the heavens. A song without words, ancient as light. Gabriel's gaze fell to the world below.
"He speaks through them now," he said.
Through the humble, through the broken, every act of kindness is a verse in his return. Raphael's voice trembled, and every forgiveness a prayer.
Uriel watched the horizon, where dawn touched the edges of the universe.
"Then dawn will never truly end," he said. "It will only continue in deeper shades of mercy." The voice lingered within them, not as command, but as companionship. When Michael closed his eyes, he could still feel it moving through his chest, like a quiet reminder that the divine had chosen not to reign above creation, but to dwell within it. He spoke softly. "We once believed the voice came from the throne, but now I see the throne was only its echo." Gabriel's wings fluttered gently. "The voice is where love listens." Below them, the kingdom between shadows shone faintly through the veil. No longer a pit of sorrow, but a sanctuary of balance. The beings who had once been trapped between mercy and exile now sang softly, their tones weaving with the hum of heaven above. Raphael smiled. "Even the forgotten have learned the song." Uriel's torch glowed with quiet pride. "And heaven has learned humility." Then came a soft ripple, not in sound but in feeling. The seal pulsed once more, and in its reflection the archangels saw something wondrous. Within its golden ring, faces appeared, the faces of mortals, men, women, and children. They were laughing, crying, forgiving. Each one carried a spark of the same light that burned in angels' wings. Michael's voice was almost a whisper. "They are the continuation." Gabriel nodded, awestruck. "The voice will never fall silent again, for it has found 1,000 tongues." Raphael bowed his head.
Then heaven no longer speaks to the world, he said.
It speaks through it. Uriel smiled faintly. And through us all. The realization moved through them like sunrise through glass. The universe, once divided by distance and fear, now pulsed as one living body. Light flowed into shadow, shadow into light. Silence kissed song. Grief embraced joy. The voice was everywhere, not as ruler, but as breath. Michael spread his wings. Then let the seal no longer be a mark of separation, he said. Let it be a vow, that no silence, no sorrow, and no distance shall ever again be left without love. The seal shimmered in answer. Its glow deepened into gold, then silver, then something beyond color, a living radiance that seemed to move with its own will. And then, from everywhere and nowhere, the voice returned one final time. Gentle, infinite, complete. I am the silence between your heartbeats, the space between your prayers, the word that never ends. You were never apart from me, only learning how to hear me again. The heavens trembled, not from sound, but from love. Every realm bowed. The mirror shone like morning dew. The city of Alamar rang with bells of light. The kingdom between shadows sang. Gabriel whispered, "He is within the waiting." Raphael murmured, "Within the wound."
Uriel breathed, "Within the fire."
And Michael, his eyes filled with tears that glowed like stars, said, "Within us." The voice faded, not leaving but resting. The seal brightened once more, then slowly dimmed until it became a simple, steady glow.
Heaven exhaled.
The worlds were still, and for the first time since the dawn of all things, creation felt not holy or distant, but home. The heavens slept, not in weariness, but in peace, the kind of sleep that follows the end of battle, when even angels forget the weight of vigilance. The stars themselves seemed to breathe slower, their fire dimmed into the soft rhythm of rest. And in that quiet, something new began to unfold, a dream not of heaven nor of earth, but of both entwined. Michael was the first to feel it.
It came to him as warmth beneath his wings, a faint trembling that echoed through the firmament.
He opened his eyes and saw not light, but memory, a landscape formed from the remnants of every moment creation had ever loved. There was the first dawn, still shimmering in the east. There were the rivers that had mirrored the sky before the flood. There were the mountains that remembered the footsteps of prophets, and the sands that had carried whispers of revelation. And above it all, a single flame, pale, gold, eternal, drifted without smoke, without heat. He knew it at once. It was the last light, the first spark of creation that had survived every fall, every silence, every flood. It had burned in Adam's eyes when he first looked upon the world, in the lamp of Abraham when he faced the stars, in the heart of every prophet who refused to forget mercy. Gabriel appeared beside him, his face lit by that sacred glow. "It dreams," he said softly. Michael nodded. "All of heaven dreams with it." The flame pulsed once, not as fire, but as heartbeat. Around it, the air began to shimmer. The dream deepened. Shapes moved within it. Wings of light, shadows of old sorrow, fragments of worlds now gone. Every layer of creation, every echo of time gathered around the flame as though answering a call too ancient to name. Raphael and Uriel descended through the still air, their light muted in reverence. Raphael whispered, "I thought the voice had finished its speaking." Uriel's torch glowed faintly, trembling.
"Perhaps this is not its word."
"Perhaps it is its dream." Michael turned toward the flame. "Then we must guard it." But even as he spoke, the light trembled, not in weakness, but in release, as though the last light did not wish to be guarded. It flickered once, twice, then sent out a breath that swept through all of heaven like the gentlest wind. And wherever that wind passed, angels dreamed. Some saw the beginning. The moment the Almighty said be, and light tore the veil of nothingness. Others saw the end, when that same light would return to its source, carrying all that had been forgiven. Gabriel closed his eyes, seeing within the dream what none had dared to imagine.
Heaven dreams of its own return, he whispered.
Raphael's voice trembled. Then this is not the end of creation. It is its remembrance. Uriel looked to Michael.
What do you see?
Michael's eyes were wet with light.
I see the last light dreaming of us, of all that learned to love while waiting.
They stood together as the flame grew brighter, and in its heart they saw visions ripple like reflected stars. They saw the seal, now whole, no longer binding but breathing. They saw Alamar glowing with rivers of mirrored mercy. They saw the kingdom between shadows alive with song. And they saw the earth, humble, fragile, glowing faintly beneath the veil of night. It was not the light of heaven that made it shine. It was something gentler, something more human. The light of forgiveness. Gabriel wept openly. Even they dream of him, he said. Raphael nodded. And he dreams through them. The flame pulsed again, and for a brief moment, every realm, heaven, earth, and the world between, aligned. The stars flickered, the oceans stilled, and all that lived or once had lived felt the same quiet breath move through them, whispering a single truth. All light is borrowed. The angels bowed, even the seal dimmed in reverence. Michael's voice was low. Then even this light will one day rest. Uriel's torch flickered softly, and yet its dream will not end. Raphael smiled faintly, his tears shining like dew, because the dream is God remembering himself through all he has made. The last light trembled once more, and in that trembling the dream deepened. The angels saw visions of what was to come, not destruction, but transformation. The worlds would not vanish.
They would awaken.
The rivers of time would flow backward, carrying memory into meaning, and every silence would open like a door, leading not to void but to reunion. Gabriel whispered, "Then the end is only the return to the beginning." Michael bowed his head, and the beginning was love. The flame rose higher, touching the highest reaches of the firmament. Its glow spread outward, wrapping the stars, the seal, and every realm in golden stillness. Raphael closed his eyes. "Listen," he said. "The light is speaking, and indeed, though no sound came, they felt it. The softest whisper ever breathed. I have never left you. You have only awakened within my dream." The angels fell to their knees, not from command, but from wonder. The last light pulsed gently above them, neither near nor far, simply everywhere.
Heaven inhaled.
Creation exhaled. And for one timeless instant there was no separation between dream and waking, between silence and song, between God and all that he had ever loved. The dream deepened. It spread like dawn over still water, soft and luminous, revealing what heaven had hidden even from itself. The last light did not blaze. It shimmered, steady and alive, a single heartbeat between eternity and remembrance. Its glow reached through the firmament, touching even the quietest corners of creation. Michael stood within the golden mist, and though he was awake, he felt as though he were dreaming too. The lines between vision and being had vanished. He looked down and saw his reflection upon the clouds, but it was not his face. It was every face that had ever prayed, wept, or forgiven. Gabriel's wings unfolded beside him, trembling with awe.
"This is not heaven as we knew it," he whispered.
"This is heaven remembering the world." Raphael placed his palm against his chest, feeling the hum within his heart. "The voice has fallen silent again," he said softly, "but the silence sings." Uriel's torch burned low, not from weakness, but reverence. The flame bent toward the last light, as if recognizing kinship. "Perhaps this dream is not his," he murmured.
"Perhaps it is ours, and he is dreaming within it."
The light pulsed, answering without words. Around them, visions began to take form. They saw time unfold backward. Stars returning to their first breath, rivers unflowing into mist, the mountains crumbling gently back into clouds. Yet none of it felt like loss. It was not destruction, but remembering, a return to stillness where nothing is gone, only resting. Raphael knelt, touching the luminous ground. All things go back to their beginning, he said. Even angels. Gabriel's gaze softened. And what were we meant to become? Michael closed his eyes. Perhaps not guardians, perhaps witnesses. The flame of the last light swayed, and for a moment the dream shifted, not into memory, but into revelation. They saw the truth that even heaven had once forgotten, that every act of love, every forgiveness whispered in secret, every tear shed in patience had not been lost to the silence. They had all been gathered, woven into the very fabric of the divine dream. Uriel smiled faintly. "It has kept them," he said. "Every small mercy, every quiet kindness." Gabriel's tears glistened like silver rain, even those we thought went unheard. From somewhere deep within the radiance, a voice, gentle and distant, spoke, not to command, but to comfort. "Nothing given in love is ever forgotten." The words passed through the air like a sigh, dissolving into warmth. The dream brightened. The angels felt themselves unburdened, as though the weight of countless ages had lifted from their wings. Michael rose slowly. "Then the purpose of the seal of all we've endured," he whispered, "was not to keep us apart from him, but to teach us how to find him in each other." Gabriel bowed his head, and the seal was mercy disguised as silence. Raphael's hands glowed softly, and the silence was love disguised as distance. Uriel's torch flickered brighter, its flame pure white, and the distance was only the space where faith learned how to breathe. The last light pulsed again, brighter than before. Within its heart, they saw not only heaven and earth, but something beyond both. A place where every soul, every spark, every forgotten dream gathered like rain returning to the sea. Raphael whispered, "This is where creation returns, not to end, but to remember why it began." The light swirled gently, shaping itself into waves of gold. The angels watched as within the glow appeared visions of humanity, countless faces across centuries shining faintly like stars, farmers tending the soil with quiet gratitude,
Mothers praying in the night.
wanderers forgiving themselves beneath vast skies. Each act, no matter how small, radiated outward, merging into the dream. Gabriel wept. "Their light sustains ours." Michael's voice trembled. "And ours was only ever meant to guide theirs." Uriel lowered his torch. Then heaven was never the destination. It was the memory of home. The flame shimmered, soft and rhythmic, as though agreeing. The dream began to hum, a low, endless tone that vibrated through every realm. It was not a song of triumph or sorrow, but completion. Raphael smiled through tears.
Do you feel it?
This is not the end of the story. This is the pause before he writes again. Gabriel nodded, his wings glowing faintly.
It feels like peace learning to speak.
Michael turned toward the light. And yet even peace dreams. As they watched, the flame flickered once more, and from its glow emerged something unexpected. A small, human figure. It was not radiant. It did not carry wings. It simply walked barefoot through the mist, its eyes reflecting the gold of heaven. Raphael gasped softly.
A child?
The figure looked up at them, its voice barely a whisper. "I am the dream of the last light." Michael knelt. "And what do you carry?" The child smiled faintly. "The memory of when all things were one, and the promise that they will be again." The angels bowed deeply, their hearts filled with wonder. The child reached out, touching Michael's hand. "The dream will not end," it said gently. "It will become the morning." And with that, the child dissolved into the light, leaving behind only warmth. Soft, endless, and alive. Uriel whispered, "Then the dawn is near." Gabriel's voice quivered. "The dream has begun to awaken. Michael rose, his wings spreading wide, his face aglow with peace. "Then let it awaken gently," he said. "For even the end of a dream can be holy." The last light shimmered, pulsing once, twice, as if taking a final breath before the dawn. The last light trembled upon the horizon of heaven, neither rising nor setting, suspended in the hush between breath and awakening. It shimmered like a single eyelash of eternity, curved and fragile, holding within it the memory of every dawn that had ever been. Michael stood before it, still within the dream that was no longer only heaven's. The light touched his face, and for the first time since the beginning, he saw not fire, not radiance, but tenderness. It did not seek to command.
It sought to rest. "The dream breathes," he whispered.
It does not end. Gabriel approached from the mist, his wings lowered, his expression softer than dawn. "It is dreaming us," he said.
"Every thought, every mercy, we are the dreams remembering."
Raphael's voice was quiet, fragile as candlelight. "And this is not a vision of what will come. It is what has always been. It did the heart of creation, still sleeping, still loving." Uriel lifted his torch, though it no longer burned with flame. It glowed instead with the light of understanding, steady and serene.
"Heaven is learning to close its eyes," he said.
And in doing so it finally sees. The last light pulsed gently and the dream rippled outward. Beneath its shimmer the city of Alamar began to stir again, its mirrored rivers glowing softly, its towers swaying like prayer candles in windless air. The well of light at its center rose like a tide, spilling warmth into the silent streets. And deep below, the kingdom between shadows glowed once more. Its people, no longer echoes, but keepers of balance, lifted their faces to the dream. Their song rose upward, soft and patient, joining the pulse of the last light. Gabriel listened.
"They sing the same melody as the stars."
Michael nodded. "Because in this dream all sound is one sound." The dream thickened. The veil between heaven and earth dissolved. They saw humanity not from above, but within. A child whispering a prayer before sleep.
A mother forgiving her own heart.
A traveler looking at the stars and wondering who was watching back. Each breath became light, each forgiveness a note in the divine song. The dream was no longer a vision of heaven. It was the memory of earth, seen through God's own rest. Raphael smiled faintly. "It remembers us as we remember him." Uriel stepped forward, his torch dimming to a soft white ember. "Then the separation was never real," he said. "It was a way for love to find itself again." From within the radiance, a voice, softer than thought, spoke once more, though not as before. It was not the commanding voice of eternity. It was the whisper of peace. There was never distance.
Only longing, teaching itself how to return.
The words settled like dew upon every soul.
Even the silence bowed.
Michael closed his eyes. "And the journey is not from darkness to light," he said. "It is from sleep to remembrance." Gabriel turned to him. "And what comes after remembrance?" Michael looked toward the last light, whose pulse had begun to slow. Not in death, but in fulfillment. "After remembrance," he said, "comes rest." Raphael knelt, tears glistening on his hands. "Then all creation is coming home." Uriel lowered his torch completely. "And heaven will finally sleep without fear." The angels gathered close as the last light began to dissolve. It did not fade, it spread. Its glow moved through them, entering their wings, their eyes, their breath. The same light rippled downward into the mortal world, threading through oceans, mountains, forests, and dreams. The stars dimmed, not because they died, but because they were no longer needed. The light that had once hung above creation now lived within it. Gabriel whispered, "The final dawn is not above us. It is within every heart that remembers how to love." Michael's voice trembled. "Then heaven has finished its song." Raphael looked upward, though there was no sky now, only warmth. "Not finished," he said. fulfilled. For a long moment there was nothing, no sound, no motion, only stillness. Then faintly, a sound like a sigh moved through everything. It was the breath of the Almighty returning to his rest. The dream continues, the voice whispered, fading into the folds of time. And you, my light, are its keepers. The angels fell to their knees. The last light sank gently into the firmament, becoming one with it. Not lost, but everywhere. And from that stillness a new dawn began, not of radiance, but of peace.
Heaven did not end, it became.
Michael looked at his companions, their faces aglow with the quiet of eternity. The seal is no longer our bond, he said softly. Love is. Gabriel smiled. Then the voice is not gone. Uriel nodded. It is listening. Raphael's hand rose slowly, catching the final breath of light as it passed.
And dreaming still.
The dream settled over creation like a blanket of light. Stars turned to silence. Time folded back into mercy. Every realm rested beneath one endless heartbeat. The pulse of God's final peace. And in that stillness one truth remained, simple as the breath that began it all. The light never left. It only learned to sleep. Before there was sound, there was listening. Before there was creation, there was longing. And before the first word was ever spoken, there was silence. Perfect, endless, and alive. Now, as the last light rested in its dream, and the heavens exhaled their long-held breath, that same silence returned, not as emptiness, but as presence. It moved through the bones of creation like a wind that remembered its source. Mountains shivered. The stars, now sleeping, hummed faintly as if whispering in their sleep. Michael stood at the edge of the still firmament, watching the horizon that was neither dawn nor dusk. He knew what was coming. He could feel it in the tremor of his wings, the same tremor that had moved through him before time began. Gabriel appeared beside him, his eyes wide with awe. The silence grows heavy again, he said softly. Michael nodded.
It is not the end.
It is the inhale before the next beginning. Raphael's voice drifted gently, low as the tide. We have seen mercy take form, seen the word become rest. Now heaven prepares to speak once more. Uriel raised his torch, its flame no longer burning, but glowing faintly like a single heartbeat. Then it will not be command this time, he said. It will be communion. The air rippled, and for an instant the heavens folded inward. Light bent, not breaking but curving, gathering into a single point of radiance. Every realm, heaven, earth, shadow, and dream, drew its breath in unison. The pulse of creation slowed, waiting. Then, softly, so softly that even silence had to listen, the first word returned. It was not sound. It was intention. It did not move through air or fire or form. It moved through being itself, and where it passed, everything remembered its purpose. Be still, for you are mine. The words echoed not outward, but inward. They filled every heart, every star, every forgotten whisper. Even the smallest grain of dust glowed faintly in answer, as if bowing. Michael fell to his knees.
It is the same voice, he breathed.
The first that ever was. Gabriel's wings shuddered. The word that began everything returns, not to create, but to complete. Raphael closed his eyes, and a tear of light rolled down his face. And we, who were made from its echo, have finally heard it again. The voice spoke once more, its tone not thunder but tenderness. I have not spoken new words, only returned the old ones to those who forgot they were never lost. At that moment, the heavens brightened not with fire, but with memory. The seal above them glowed gold again, yet this time it carried no mark of division. It was whole, round, breathing. Its veins of light stretched outward, connecting every realm, every soul. Uriel lifted his torch high. The seal is no longer the boundary, he said. It is the breath that carries the word. Michael rose slowly, the light of the seal washing over his face. And what is the word now? he asked softly. The voice answered, "Love," spoken again and again until even silence says it without sound. Gabriel trembled, his wings glowing faintly. Then the voice will never fade.
"It will rest," said the voice, "and when it rests, you will speak for me, not with command, but with compassion."
That is the language of the eternal. Raphael knelt and pressed his hand to the luminous ground. Then every healing was the word learning how to speak gently. Uriel smiled faintly, and every flame, the word remembering how to see. The heavens pulsed once more, light and sound, silence and stillness, all wove together into a single vast harmony. The angels felt themselves not as watchers, but as notes in the great song of existence. Michael turned toward his companions, his eyes gleaming with peace. "This is not the return of something lost," he said. "It is the remembrance of what never ceased to be." Gabriel nodded. "The word is eternal. It never needed to return, only to be heard again." From below the world answered. The wind over the oceans carried faint whispers. The forest swayed as though in prayer. The mountains trembled, and rivers shimmered under unseen light. Creation had remembered its first song. Raphael's voice quivered. "Even the earth prays."
Uriel's torch flared, though softly, like the glow of a sleeping star.
"And heaven listens." The voice whispered again, the sound now woven through the breath of all things. "The first word was never mine alone. It lives in every being that loves beyond fear."
"Speak, and creation will sing with you."
The angels bowed low, their wings unfurling in reverent silence. Michael whispered, "Then this is not speech. This is the breath of reunion." Gabriel smiled through tears.
"Heaven and earth have found one voice."
The first word shimmered between them. No longer sound, no longer command, simply presence.
It moved through the air like golden dust, settling upon every creature, every leaf, every drop of water.
Raphael looked toward the world below.
"Then the language of God is not thunder," he said.
"It is kindness." Uriel nodded, his torch dimming as though entering eternal rest. "And the grammar of heaven is forgiveness." The voice spoke one final time, gentle as dusk. "Let there be love, not as light, but as life everlasting." And with that, the heavens fell silent once more, not in loss, but in fullness. The first word had returned. The dream of the last light was complete, and all of creation breathed together, the beginning and the end as one. The heavens had never been so still, not even in the beginning, not even when the first light broke through the void. This was a deeper stillness, vast and warm, filled with breath that belonged to no single being. The word had returned, and with it came a peace that hummed through everything that had ever existed. Michael stood beneath the renewed seal, its glow now soft and eternal. He could no longer tell where light ended and life began. The firmament pulsed with gentle rhythm, each wave of radiance echoing through the countless folds of creation. Every world, every prayer, every unspoken thought swayed in time with the pulse. "It breathes," he whispered. "The word itself breathes." Gabriel stepped forward, his eyes shining with tears that were no longer sorrow, but gratitude. "It breathes because he rests," he said. "Creation is no longer speaking to him, it is speaking with him." Raphael knelt and pressed his palm to the luminous ground.
"It feels like every wound has become a prayer," he murmured.
The scars of creation no longer ache, they glow. Uriel's torch, now nearly transparent, hovered like a steady star. "We have watched him create," he said softly. "We have watched him withdraw. And now we witness what even angels could never imagine, the Creator becoming creation's silence." From somewhere beyond time, the voice answered. Not loud, not soft, simply everywhere at once. "I was never apart from you."
"I only stepped within you so that you could learn to speak with me, not after me." The archangels bowed low, their wings trembling with reverence.
Michael's voice was barely a breath. We called it silence, but it was you teaching us to listen. And in listening, said the voice, you learn to love. The heavens rippled with light. The seal's golden veins expanded outward, winding through the constellations, into the depths of the oceans, into the hearts of living things. The word moved gently, like wind over sleeping waters. Gabriel's voice quivered as he gazed downward toward earth. Look, he whispered. In the mortal realm something had changed. The night sky seemed closer. The stars pulsed softly, their rhythm in perfect accord with heaven's. People stirred from sleep, not in alarm, but in calm. Some wept without knowing why. Some prayed words they didn't remember learning. Children smiled in their dreams. The wind carried the faintest echo of song. Raphael's eyes filled with light.
They feel it, he said.
The word has reached them. Uriel lifted his torch slightly. It has always lived in them, he said. They were its echo long before they could speak. Michael closed his eyes, overwhelmed by awe.
Every act of kindness, every forgiveness whispered into the dark. It was the first word spoken again.
Yes, the voice whispered, for love does not repeat, it remembers. The words swept through creation, awakening even the forgotten corners. Deep within the kingdom between shadows, the remnants of sorrow began to fade into gold. The city of Alamar glowed brighter than ever, its mirrored rivers carrying the reflection of the new dawn. Every tower, every whisper of light became a verse in an endless psalm. Gabriel turned to his brothers.
Do you see it? He said.
Every realm has found its tone in the song. Raphael smiled, tears streaking down his face. And this is the completion of the seal, not as command, but as chorus. Uriel bowed his head, and the light that was once separated has now become one language, mercy. The heavens trembled again, not in fear, but in recognition. The first word pulsed like a heart, each beat sending warmth through the cosmos. In the beginning I said be, the voice murmured. Now I say belong. Michael felt the sound move through his wings, through his bones, through the very essence of his being. He could no longer tell where the divine ended and the angel began. The word has become us, he said softly. We have become its sound. Gabriel smiled. Then heaven no longer speaks through command. It breathes through compassion. Raphael nodded, his light steady. Even the smallest prayer now carries the first word. Uriel looked to the horizon where the veil between realms shimmered. And when it falls silent again, that silence will not be absence. It will be the space where creation listens back. The voice spoke one last time, its words like a sunrise drawn through eternity. You have heard me, not because I spoke, but because you became still enough to remember that you were always part of my speaking. A breeze passed through heaven, gentle as mercy. The stars flared briefly and the seal began to dissolve, not in destruction, but in fulfillment. Its golden light spread across the sky, scattering like dust until every realm shimmered with its glow. The angels bowed deeply. Michael whispered, Then the seal has kept its promise, Raphael replied. It bound us not to contain, but to connect. Gabriel breathed, and now it releases us to continue his word. Uriel smiled faintly. For love has no end, it only finds new forms. The heavens brightened once more. The word, no longer separate from the worlds it made, settled into the breath of all things. It spoke not as sound, but as life, pulsing quietly in every being that dared to love without reason. Michael raised his hands toward the infinite light. Then let the first word rest, he said. Its echo will keep the worlds awake. The voice faded into stillness, not gone, but everywhere. And as the last of its radiance folded into the horizon, heaven whispered back the only answer it could. Be. The light no longer came from above. It came from within. Heaven had ceased to shine as a distant fire. Now it glowed like the quiet pulse of a living heart. Every star, every angel, every creature that had ever whispered a prayer now carried a spark of that breath within them. The first word had not simply returned, it had come home. Michael stood upon the silent firmament where the seal once blazed. Now it was only air and stillness, though the memory of its light lingered like warmth after flame. He looked around and saw the other archangels standing near, their wings dimmed not in sorrow, but in peace. "It is finished," Raphael said softly, his hands glowing faintly with the memory of healing. "The word has returned to all that breathes." Gabriel's gaze was fixed upon the horizon where the edge of heaven touched the curve of the mortal world.
"Not finished," he whispered.
"Fulfilled." Uriel lowered his torch, no longer a weapon of flame, but a quiet ember of remembrance. "And what follows fulfillment?" he asked. Michael smiled faintly. "Rest." They stood in silence, the kind that feels like prayer. The heavens themselves seemed to hold their breath. The mirror of the first light hovered faintly in the distance, its reflection now still and infinite, as though even eternity had chosen to sleep. Then, from the farthest reaches of creation, a sound began to rise. Not thunder, not song, but something deeper, the hum of life itself. It was the heartbeat of every world, every sea, every star, blending into one sound that was neither beginning nor end. Gabriel bowed his head. "It is the word breathing again, through us, through them, through everything." Raphael's voice trembled.
"Then even silence is alive."
The sound grew stronger. Waves of light rippling through the cosmos, like wind moving through a field of gold. It swept across the city of Alamar, where the mirrored streets shimmered once more with living grace. It reached the kingdom between shadows, where beings of old sorrow lifted their faces in awe. It touched the mortal world, where night gave way to a dawn that did not rise from the east, but from every heart that still believed in mercy. Uriel lifted his torch, letting its final light merge with the glow that now filled the heavens. "This is the true seal," he said quietly. "Not a mark of division, but a covenant of breath." The voice returned, soft, infinite, nearer than thought. "The word was never a command. It was a promise. And the promise was never that I would return, only that you would remember." Michael bowed deeply. "We remember," he said. "Then speak," said the voice, "for the word now belongs to you." And for the first time since the dawn, heaven answered. It did not echo with trumpets. It did not shake with thunder. It breathed. One vast, quiet exhale that carried through every star, every realm, every corner of creation. The archangels spoke together, not in unison, but in harmony. "Be as you were. Be as you are. Be as you were always meant to be." The voice faded, not gone, only listening. Gabriel's tears glistened like silver fire.
"He has given the word back to us," he said. Raphael nodded.
"And now it will live wherever love is spoken."
Uriel's torch flickered once more, then extinguished, not in darkness, but in completion. "And the light no longer needs guarding," he said.
"It has become every dawn." Michael turned his gaze downward. The world below shimmered in peace. The rivers reflected heaven's quiet flame, and the oceans breathed with the rhythm of the divine. The first birds began to sing, though their song was older than their bodies. Each note seemed to say the same thing. "Remember," he whispered to the wind. "Then let this be the final chapter of the seal, deed, not closed, but kept." Gabriel's wings unfurled slowly. "And let the first word be the final breath of every heart that still dares to love." Raphael touched his hand to the air, releasing the last spark of his light. "May it fall like rain," he said, "upon those who still sleep in doubt." Uriel bowed his head. "May it find them gently." And Michael, oldest of them, keeper of beginnings, spoke the last line of heaven's dream. "Let all creation rest in what it has become, the voice of God remembering itself, The air shimmered once more, then fell silent. The word rested. No light, no sound, only breath. The angels closed their eyes, their wings folding in prayer. Heaven dimmed to silver. The earth glowed softly beneath its veil of clouds. The universe inhaled once more, not to speak, but to listen. And in that endless quiet, that living peace between one heartbeat and the next, the voice whispered for the last time, "And I am with you still." The silence after was not silence at all. It was love. The stars no longer burn. They breathe. The heavens, once filled with countless songs, now rest in one quiet chord, the note that began it all. The angels no longer stand above the worlds they guarded. They walk within them, their wings folded into light, their silence woven through the hum of every dawn. The seal is gone, the war is over, the silence fulfilled. Somewhere, beyond what eyes can see or hearts can name, the voice sleeps. Not vanished, not distant, only dreaming. Its breath moves through oceans and trees, through laughter and tears, through the stillness that waits before every prayer. The first word has returned to where it always belonged, within breath itself.
Every time a child forgives, the heavens remember.
Every time a soul chooses mercy over wrath, the seal renews. Every time love speaks without sound, the voice returns. And so creation does not end. It only rests between heartbeats, waiting for us to listen again.
Close your eyes.
You can still feel it. The quiet pulse that lives beneath your ribs, the rhythm that once guided angels, the warmth that carries the echo of the first word. It has never left you. It waits, patient as light beneath the eyelids, whispering the same truth that began the cosmos. Be still. You were born from my silence. You carry my word. Let that knowing settle deep into your bones. Let it hum through your breathing. Let the world around you fade into that sacred stillness where no name is needed, no proof is required.
Only peace, only remembrance.
For long before the angels sang, before the stars lit their first fires, before any scripture dared to speak of beginnings, there was love. Quiet, unending, and awake. And it still speaks. Through you. Through every tear that forgives. Through every dawn that rises without sound. The voice is not gone. It has only learned to rest inside you. And if one night you wake and the world feels heavy again, listen. Not outward, but inward. In that breath between silence and prayer, you will hear it once more. The first word, the last light, and the stillness that has never stopped loving you.